Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Ms. Huerta, can you please call the roll? Ms. Huerta, can you
Mayor
please call
Paulette
the roll?
Guajardo.
Present.
Mayor Paulette Guajardo.
Present.
Here.
Councilmembers Roland
Hernandez.
Barrera.
Here.
Michael
Gil
Hunter.
Hernandez.
Here.
Michael Hunter. Billy Lerma is
Here.
absent.
John Martinez.
Billy Lerma is absent.
Ben
John
Molina.
Martinez.
Present.
Mike
Ben
Pesley.
Molina.
Present.
Greg Smith.
Mike Pesley. City Manager
Smith.
Peter Zanoni.
Present.
City Manager
Attorney
Peter
Miles
Zanoni.
Risley.
Present.
City
Mayor and
Attorney
Council,
Miles
a quorum
Risley.
of the
Here.
council and the
Mayor and
required
Council,
charter
a quorum of the
officers are
council
present
and
to
the
conduct the
required charter
meeting.
officers are present to conduct the meeting.
Great. So today we have our fiscal year 2022.
So today we have
our fiscal year 2022
streets,
budget
stormwater,
workshop, including
streets,
proposed
stormwater,
stormwater, including water and wastewater utilities, water and wastewater utilities,
gas
capital
department.
budget, and gas department.
Great. Yes, we're going to start with Richard Martinez.
Yes, we're going to start with
Richard
Martinez,
on,
Public Works
streets
Director,
and stormwater,
on,
streets
and other public
and
works
stormwater
related items.
and other public works related
Thank you,
items.
sir. Good morning, Mayor,
morning.
sir, council members. Good morning, Mayor, council members. Richard Martinez, Director of Public
And I'm
Works.
here today to present our 2020.
and I'm here today to present our
2020
budget,
one and
which
2022
includes
proposed
streets,
budget,
traffic,
which includes
we're going to go over
streets,
stormwater, traffic,
and then we're going to go over
proposed,
stormwater, and then we're going to go over
standalone
proposed
utility
stormwater
fee as
standalone
well.
utility fee as well.
So we're going to talk about the organization of public works. How do we organized?
How do we
So we're 268.
how are we organized?
Staff
So we're
members.
268
and they're in
staff
three
members.
general areas.
And
I wanna
they're in
introduce
three
the
general
assistant
areas.
directors
And I
that are
want to
over those
introduce
areas.
the assistant
So
directors
to the
that
left,
are over
you'll
those
see,
areas.
so
Sarah
to the left,
Munoz
you'll
is over
see,
traffic operations.
Sarah Munoz is over traffic operations, infrastructure management, and support services. And Sarah's here this morning to answer any questions if you have any of those in those areas. And then in the center of the org chart, you'll see that's Roland Mata. He handles the operations and maintenance area. So that's the street operations and stormwater operations. And that's the bulk of our staff members in Public Works because we're service oriented. And so those staff members are to provide services out in the field. And then to the far right, you'll see Gabriel Hinojosa. He handles stormwater engineering, which covers stormwater planning and environmental quality as well in those areas. So those are three major components that we need to have. If you look at the org chart, there's asterisks in those areas, in those boxes. Those asterisks means these are areas that we're looking at adding improvements in. And so those areas are considered where our improvements are as we're proposing them for you this year. So what's our mission statement in streets and traffic? We'll start with them first. So it's to manage and maintain and develop the city's street transportation system. You see there's a lot of different things that involve that. Sidewalks, streets, street maintenance, pavement markings, just the gamut of what we do in traffic and in streets. So what do we encompass? So we have over 1,200 centerline miles of streets and roadways. That's like driving to Chicago, the amount of streets in our city. And that's quite a few roadways. 252 signalized intersections and about 50,000 signs as well. And if you have been in Corpus most of your life, you'll know that every weekend we have signs that get knocked down, traffic signals that get knocked down. It's important that we continue to maintain those areas. So let's talk about what our achievements have been in 2021. So 19 months ago when I got here, the city manager gave me a lot of initiatives that we had to accomplish. And a couple of those that you see on there are those very ones that he gave me. So the achievement one, we established the first ever 5-year rolling infrastructure management plan that's approved by you and can only be changed by you. And so this gives us more transparency to our citizens. And you can see that document online on a daily basis. And when we approved budget this year, our 2026 year will go on as well. So again, transparency so our citizens will know what roads are going to be done. We fully implemented our design team, internal engineering design team. So now all of our projects that we do for contractual services in street maintenance are designed in-house. Still a few in the residential reconstructions, but we're going to start transitioning those as well. So the other one, the major initiatives, was to implement in-house paving crews. And I am proud to say that Mr. Mata has been instrumental in implementing 2 fully staffed paving crews today that we do in-house work. Those are the roads that we would never get to, the roads that are at a point where they don't need total reconstruction yet, but they're past a point where they just need minimal maintenance. And that's the area that he's hitting today and doing neighborhood approach. So 2 major initiatives. Vision Zero program initiatives, we implemented those. We've been talking about those for a few years, but we implemented last year and put in some devices, and we're going to continue that process this year. So another major initiative. Another one that you brought forward and assisted us in completing and actually approved this last Tuesday was developing the first concrete street maintenance program. And that went forward because we have a big need in the city. So we build rigid roadways, but they just don't last on their own. They have to have maintenance, and they're very expensive. So if we invest, we have to continue to invest in maintaining those roadways as well. So a lot of major accomplishments and achievements that have happened that are major initiatives for the organization. So let's talk about the historical levels of funding in street maintenance, just over the last 3 years. And you'll see there's a significant amount of funding that's gone through. So what we did was put together these bubbles charts so you can take a look at it very easily. So if you look at 2020, so 2020, if you go up in the 3 major areas, we have street maintenance, arterials and collectors, and residential streets. We started in 2020 at $128 million. And if you look at 2021, that went down to $78 million. And that's predominantly because of arterials and collectors went down a bit and residential streets went down a bit. But again, projects are still moving forward. In 2022, you see we're reinvesting again at $121 million. But I want to talk about across the board. So if you look at street maintenance across the last 3 years, these are where we fix potholes. This is where we do base and pavement repairs. This is where when citizens call in to do maintenance on that, and also our overlay program, in-house overlay program, we've spent $108 million over the last 3 years just in that category, in minor maintenance and heavy maintenance. So if you look at arterials and collectors, these are our bond projects, $165 million over the last 3 years across those three years in that category. And residential street reconstruction, which is one of our biggest needs here in Corpus Christi, because everybody, when you go outside your home, that's exactly what you see first, is a damaged roadway. And it's the deferred maintenance over all the years that have had the condition of our roads to the point that we are today. And so we've been spending $54.3 million, and that's an area that you'll see that's proposed that we're actually proposing to increase our budget in that area. So the next slide is what we consider our bubble slide, and it kind of tells you all the different funding mechanisms to get there. And there are 10 different funding mechanisms. And I'm going to start to the right. So if those you see residential street reconstruction, and you see in the center bubble, in the blue bubble, is $18.4 million is what we're proposing this year. But everything around that bubble is what encompasses and what is our funding for that. And in the bottom right, you'll see, yes, we do have the 2+2 cent property tax that funds the majority of that at $8.4 million. Then there's a one-time general fund transfer of 6.1. Here's where we're increasing our budget for more residential streets. And so that's a transfer in to be able to do that. In a one-time basis, and we're hoping to build on that in the future, continue to build on that. So there's a general fund revenue. We get 2/3 of 1%. That's up from last year of 1/3 of 1%. So that's some additional funding. We have an industrial district funding that comes through that, and then we have interest. Again, making $18.45 million for that area. So let's concentrate in the center bubble. That's arterials and collectors and reconstruction. That's $60 million for this year. And so we get general obligation bonds. So again, our bond program. There's Type B funds of $1.2 million. That's Elizabeth Street that we identified to do that roadway near Spahn Hospital as well. And then there's grants of $1.6 million. That's Junior Beck Road that's involved in that area. So I'm going to move over again to the left, and that's street maintenance. So again, this is where we do our pothole patching. This is where we do our overlays. We do our base and pavement repairs. So all of you over the last month to month and a half have received multiple complaints about potholes and street repair because I get them from you on a daily basis. And so it's a big need. And this area, we actually last year were able to get 4 more pothole patchers, but because of COVID and their production is slowed, and we're not expecting them until September of October of this year. A couple months away. I can't wait to get them in here because we have the work to be able to do. But our crews are working 6 days a week, 12 hours to 14 hours a day trying to keep up with what's out there right now. As it starts to dry, we'll be able to catch up, but that prolonged rainy area really did damage our roadways throughout. So we had an accelerated degradation of our roadways. And you'll see in a minute one of the reasons why we want to evaluate our streets again. That's important because of those things that happen. So we're at $42.8 million, and so there are a lot of different things in there. There's general fund revenue at 6%. The street maintenance fee is there. So everyone pays the street maintenance fee, and that's $11 million of that. And then we get RTA funding. So there's a formula that they utilize on their revenue that we get a certain portion of that for damaging our roadways, for them using and damaging our roadways. That's about $2.7 million. There's industrial district funding, and then there's other interest fees at $7.8 million. That's where our improvements are packaged in there. We also looked at additional street maintenance material money. So Councilman Hernandez, you asked me one time last year, are we going to be able to sustain the paving that we have with the money we currently have, and that we needed to move some money over into fund balance to make sure that we continue paving at the level that we're paving today. So that encompasses that area. So there are 3 general areas with a lot of different funding sources that help us fund street maintenance throughout the city. Very important area, and we need to continue to build on what we've already put in place. So the next slide shows funding highlights. So these are the highlights. There are a lot of different things out there.
Excuse me, Mr. Martinez, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. We have a question by Councilman Pusley.
Yes, sir.
Richard, before we jump ahead back on slide 7, just a couple of quick questions. On the residential street, the 18.4 million, how many miles of residential streets will that fix?
Very good question. So it's about $1 million a mile, if we look at that.
So roughly 18 miles.
18 miles.
Of residential.
Because remember, we're putting in curbs, sidewalks, and then brand new roadway, pulling it all out and bringing it all back in. It's not rehab at all, it's reconstruction.
Does that include the infrastructure under the road as well?
So the utility companies are responsible for upgrading their utilities. So again, the utilities department would have to upgrade their utilities.
Okay.
If we have to do stormwater, that stormwater group would have to pay for the stormwater improvements that go along with that project as well.
And how many miles of residential streets in the city of Corpus Christi would you estimate need reconstruction?
About 40% of our streets, sir.
About 40%.
40% of our residential streets have gotten to the point where we allowed them to, where they need to be reconstructed. I don't want to say allowed, that we actually got to the point where we didn't maintain them properly, and they gotten to that point. So as soon as the concrete starts to wave on those gutters is when those roadways will start to hold water and damage and get up under the subgrade.
So at $18 million a year, how many years is that going to take us?
We would need to go multiple years. This is a 20-year.
All of us will be termed out by the time.
This is a 20-year process, sir. Street maintenance doesn't happen overnight, but I will tell you, when I presented the IMP to most of you that were able to make it and talked about the IMP process, and you have seen where the dollars that we're investing here today are making a difference in that program. I've been in organizations where we just stayed at an equilibrium and didn't go up or down because we were at a point where we were in the 70s. Right now, we're still 59. Our overall PCI score is 459, but it started out at 57 19 months ago. And so every year we're putting dollars on the ground and actually building those roads. We're increasing that. And so we're looking in the 5 years, the end of the 5 years, we'll be at a 70. And other cities, that's where you start at. Well, we're trying to get there, get to 70 as the overall network.
So do you foresee any point in the future where our obligations toward reconstruction on arterials and collectors would reduce such that we could increase the amount of money going into the residential street fund?
So there is an improvement that we're putting in place for a pavement management system that'll help us forecast that. And it'll help us forecast in what year we'd be able to start reducing down that commitment. But I will tell you, arterials and collectors are the life of our city. And if arterials and collectors aren't at a condition where we can move transportation through, then you don't have the investment that comes into our city. The citizens don't come in. So that's always a continual investment, and they're not cheap. They're very expensive in arterials and collectors, but we have to keep that up.
Last question. The industrial district number you show here in two different places, is that the same? I mean, I know it's the same amount. Is that the same money in two different places, or is that?
Two different pots of money.
So two different pots?
Two different pots.
Okay, so, and those fees are determined when we negotiate the industrial district revenues with industry?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. And that is based on what? How did we come up with that number?
It's based on a percentage of payment in lieu of taxes that's negotiated. And then, so that's the baseline, and then city council budget policies dictate what percentage of that payment comes to the streets. So it's not a separate line item per se on the payment in lieu of taxes. It's that they pay us a pilot that's negotiated by the council or the staff, and then the council consideration.
Okay.
And then the council budget policy says a percentage of that goes directly to residential
So
streets.
it's just a percentage basis, it's not based on their usage of roads or how
No.
many roads they access or any of that?
Exactly, right, yeah.
Okay.
So that can be renegotiated.
Right, so again, the pilot, the payment in lieu of taxes is just one number, it's one negotiated figure. I believe it's 65%, Eddie, 62.5% of what they would pay. So that's step one. Then city council says, okay, of that payment, we're going to put X percent into streets. So it's not that we tell the industries, you're going to pay us for street maintenance. It's rather, you're going to pay us a payment in lieu of taxes because you're not in the city limits. And then the city council budget policy says, of that money we get in, we're going to put so much into streets.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the city pulls that out of the number that we get in total
Exactly.
from
Yes, sir, right.
Okay.
So it's not like a separate line item for the assessment to the industry on the pilot?
Well, it just seems to me like that number is slightly less than what RTA pays us, and I would venture to say that industry has a bigger impact on our roads and streets than RTA.
Right, yeah, so it's a council policy choice. We can we can say, hey, we're gonna put more of the pilot into streets. This year,
Yeah.
in this budget, there's a council policy where 2/3 of the general fund revenues, instead of 1/3, come into, you can see it in the residential streets, comes into, 2/3 of 1% comes into the residential street reconstruction. So 3 years ago, the city council said, we want to get to 1%, and it was 1/3. This year, it's 2/3. Next year will be 1% of the general fund revenues comes into residential street reconstruction.
Okay.
So those are good. This is, the council should applaud itself for having pretty strong budget policies. It's numerous pages. In San Antonio, we didn't have that.
Right.
So this council's done a great job in setting budget policies to include how much goes to streets. And that's an example of such.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Richard.
And
Appreciate it.
if I may, just on that, because it's a very interesting subject, I know we have a prior council member here, Mr. Loeb. He was actually on council. I would love your thoughts, because he was on council when they negotiated some of this with in terms of, I'm sorry, the IDAs.
Yes, sir. So I was on the council that passed the street fee. Just to show you how far you guys have come, my first budget when I was on council, the street maintenance budget was $10 million a year and had not changed since 1986, really. And at that point, the mayor's task force had said we needed to spend $80 million a year just to keep the streets the same condition they were, and that seemed like a huge hill to climb. So this is one of those batons that keeps getting passed, and you guys are doing a great job on it. So when we passed the street fee, one of the concerns was that because the industrial district was outside the city limits, none of the industrial customers were going to be paying the street fee. So we had the industrial district agreement being renegotiated a year or two after that. So one of our big negotiating points when we went in was we want the industrial district to pay a street fee that would be equivalent to what they were paying if they had been in the city limits. And so that is kind of the basis of the fee. If you go back and look at what their payments were, their payments basically increased by a big chunk of their payment increase at that point was to basically compensate the fund for street maintenance. So that's the history of it.
Okay. So a little bit about the highlights in that area. So just talking about a few things. Again, the $4.2 million for as you'll see, there's going to be an improvement for another street crew that will help with utility repairs, where the utilities department will go in and replace water lines and sewer lines. The residential street reconstruction area, there's a one-time general fund transfer, again, to add additional dollars there, and going from the general fund from 1/3 to 2/3 of 1%. It's additional dollars, and then there's type B funding as well. So we'll go to enhancement number 1. So this is one of our biggest enhancements that we're going to continue to build on what we started 19 months ago. And so working with the utilities department, we looked at, said, how can we improve that process? And I have to really thank Michael Murphy and his guidance to go forward. He's looking at, if the utilities department is going to go forward and put in a water line and tear up a roadway, instead of just doing the repairs on the trench, he wanted to see how we could partner together to repair the entire roadway. And so for us, is we build another crew in to do that, and then that also would give us capacity to do road work on our own streets as well that weren't having any utilities. So we looked at it and looked at his work plan, and one crew would be 60% of the time would be working on utility projects to put those roadways back together, and 40% of the time would be doing additional IMP projects, so adding more capacity to our IMP as well. So this would add 12 FTEs and all that equipment. So again, we talked to our local vendors about equipment and when they could get it here. And so this is a 6-month funded improvements. We feel that we can get our equipment in the first 6 months of this. And so we're hiring our people in 9 months because they're specially trained staff members. We got to have special trained staff members. We got to have people that know how to operate a paver, a miller. In this area, Councilor Molina, you had talked about a reclaimer. So this also brings in a reclaimer to be able to reclaim and stabilize those roadways as well. This is a major heavy crew that we'll be able to add. This will be 3 crews that we'll be able to have in-house to do that work that currently we don't have on the program today. So enhancement 2, Vision Zero program enhancements, is to continue that process. We had some success this year with, and I'll give you some example, flashing stop signs. For us, that really made a difference in some areas. We got a lot of feedback from our citizens about those. The speed trailers that we put out, I call them, these are your speed trailers. You put them out there and you're able to calculate traffic and speed of traffic, and so that you can put in traffic calming different devices or put in signs, that type of thing. It's a very important process. So this will build on that. Last year we started at $120,000. This year this will add another $800,000 to that, so $920,000.
Richard, how many speed trailers do you have?
Currently we have 4.
You have 4.
Right.
Okay.
So now we want to add additional 4 that would come in to help us. And then stop signs, there would be multiple stop signs that we'll be able to buy. Last year we had a small amount that we were able to buy with that $120,000. This would significantly increase that. One thing that I didn't mention that I want to mention that we also added on here is street lighting. Mm-hmm. So there's no funding if someone calls today and says, I want a new street light, a brand new street light. So we can put it in the process, but that funding has to come from somewhere. Right now, this is going to be able to put 100 street lights in as well. Again, for areas that are dimly lit that would help pedestrian safety and mobility through an area. So we'll be able to put street lights as well.
So all the street in some of that state?
No, I'm talking about new street lights. So if somebody calls us and said, in my neighborhood, it's really dark, and we look and say there's been a lot of accidents, or maybe the crime is up in that area, those are prime areas for us to put additional street lighting in that currently doesn't have street lighting today. So again, this is not repairing the street lights that are out there. We work with AEP to repair those. This is to add additional lighting in places that don't have it right now today.
Councilman Pusley?
Do you work with AEP, Richard, on adding street lights that they would help finance?
We do. We work with them on that. But what they look at right now, I'll tell you what we started working with them last year. We looked at trying to do an LED transition for that. So we came back and asked for them to come back in and say, what would it take us to do LED transitions throughout the city? With that process, we were going to do infill. So in other words, the areas that don't have the lighting. And so currently today, they told us it would be very difficult for them to finance it themselves. There are other companies that have come in and said they can finance it based on the savings of dollars that you'll have on utility savings. So I've had experience in that. So in Fort Worth, we owned our own lights, not AEP. Fort Worth owned our own lights. And so we had companies that came in and said, we will be able to give you savings in 10 and 20 years. And so we did pilot programs. And so in those pilot programs, they actually worked out where they were equal when we went through. There was no savings at that point. So we really need to be careful on how we're looking at financing streetlight, LEDs, or improvements, that kind of thing. The dollars that we could get internally are cheaper than if we would try to finance it somewhere.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in this, I'm sorry.
So sorry, Mr. Molina.
Thank you, Mayor. The Vision Zero program was something that I had spearheaded a couple of years back, and I'm grateful to my colleagues that helped support it, and I'm happy to see that we're continuing to make that investment. In District 2, we've had a lot of pedestrian injuries and fatalities, and so I'm glad that we're taking a serious look at this and making our streets safer for our pedestrians and our cyclists. So thank you.
Yes, sir. So this also adds 3 FTEs for implementation of signs, crosswalks that we're going to need to be installing. So again, this is a very important program, and I appreciate y'all supporting that last year and moving this forward. Brings us to the next as a major city in Texas. So the next one is Enhancement 3 is the LED internal illuminated street signs. So all of these signs that you approved last year have already been installed. And so we're going to be building on that. So again, city our size, it's for mobility. So if you're going through, you want to know where you are without having to take out your phone and seeing on Google where you are. Very easily seen at night. This will allow for us to be putting in 59 signs installed in 15 intersections citywide. So these would be on arterials like Staples, Airline, in the area of Lipes. So there's just all over the city. So we want to make sure that we're hitting all of our areas. And this puts $88,000 towards that, continuing the process that we started last year and continuing that process. So Enhancement 4 is a very important program to me, and I think a lot of you on council. It's Safe Routes to School program. This is where we're going to start. This is the start of this process. For us, pedestrian safety and mobility focused around our schools within a quarter mile is important. So we have schools where students do walk to school. We've had a couple of instances this last year. So you see that picture on the right, that was actually a walkway that we put in place, and it was a school district that was near Williams Road that actually had pasture land, and the kids had to walk on the street if they didn't want to walk on where a farmer farmed the right-of-way. And so we put that flexible pathway, so it's a bike path and a walk path. These are the kind of things that we can put in internally in-house if we had funding and with our contractors. So when we looked at that, we evaluated all of our schools, and we took the top 3 schools that had the biggest deficiencies, where I mean by school zones issues, crosswalk issues, sidewalk issues. When we looked at that whole thing and how the walkable paths are in there, bike paths, and then and looked and said we put 3. We are recommending 3 school districts, 3 schools themselves. Toloso Midway Primary was the highest priority in District 1. Fannin Elementary was the next priority in District 2, and Yeager Elementary in District 3. Again, this is the start of this program. We need to start somewhere with it. We want to continue that process. When we looked at that, this would be a 10-year plan if we were to maintain it on a yearly basis. Do we have 10 years to be able to do that? Probably not. We need to look at, once we get this in place, how do we accelerate the funding, whether it's in the bond program or whether it's just, again, adding additional funding internally in-house. Mm-hmm. What I want to make sure that I convey across today is that this doesn't preclude us to, like what we do today. If someone calls us and said there's a crosswalk that needs to be installed, we still have internal resources to do that or install a sign. This is going through and doing a comprehensive review for adding a school zone with all the signs and flashing lights and everything that goes along with that, and sidewalks throughout the area within a quarter mile.
Can I interrupt you, Richard? So, Peter, when we are planning, not we, CCISD is planning a new school, why aren't these things being looked upon?
Well, yeah,
And
they
and
are-
a great
oh, sorry.
example would be Colda. Colda came in, I don't know how old the school is now, but it's in a neighborhood with no sidewalks, and then it becomes our problem. And then we're sitting here going, how do we make the path? How do we get the kids to school? London's having this problem right now because there's a school in a cornfield. And now there are homes in the middle of cornfields. And now it's going to be our problem, not necessarily, I'm using that loosely, but
Right.
what do we do about it? So in initial planning of these schools, and I realize many back then were, much of what exists now may not, or what have you, or maybe there wasn't sufficient planning and vision to see what the future holds for the area.
Right.
But wouldn't this be something, part of this, that we should be looking at early on?
Yeah, agreed, it is. And so we're doing a couple things to improve the codes here within the city. So the Unified Development Code, as we update that. Also, we're going to be bringing to the council design standards manual for development so that we have the right quality of product that's put in. I know personally we were involved with the new Carroll High School, and Richard and I, and his traffic engineer. And so for that facility, there's good transportation systems, both for vehicles and pedestrians. So it's a matter of being at the table during the construction period. And probably in the past, we just weren't there. I can't
Well,
really speak
and
to
they
you.
don't, do they have to come through all of our process in order to build the schools?
They do, yes, yeah. So traffic approves
Right.
their design concepts, and they can object, which we did at Carroll. We objected to their initial plan, right,
Right.
Richard?
We've objected a couple times to that, and we were looking at the flow through, because the flow through their parking lot actually dictates what happens on the roadway.
Right.
And so there are things that we asked them to put in place, and ultimately, we got an agreement to do that. But when you're looking at outside that school footprint into the neighborhoods, they're not required to do anything into the neighborhoods that actually come out into those arterials or collectors that are going through there. So that's something we can definitely look at, but when we talk about that, we tell them every single deficiency that we see when it comes to pedestrians and vehicles.
Well, and I guess my comments are more geared towards sidewalks. Because again, you have Greystone, I think it is, Greystone, over there at Colda, and there are no sidewalks. But yet the school was built after only one, Greystone was there. And then the phases came in and the other, I mean, it was
That's why we have to-
that would have
yeah.
been a great time to say, well, how are your kids going to walk to school in the ditch? I mean,
Yeah.
and now it's I think now it's taken care of, but it becomes a city problem.
It
at
does,
that point.
exactly. That's why we need to beef up and strengthen those development codes.
Well, I think, yeah, and
That's why we're
again,
doing
I'm
the-
talking more sidewalks, though,
Yeah.
Peter. We need to look at this, and that needs to be a point of discussion, a true point of discussion.
Yeah.
10 years from now, what is this going to look like?
Exactly.
And somebody's going to be sitting up here going, why didn't they think about this when they were building that school?
Yeah. Or building the neighborhood as well,
The
right?
neighborhood, right,
connectivity.
right.
I mean, we had a thing where Councilman Hernandez talked about sidewalks only on one side, brand new subdivision. So we need sidewalks for multimodal transportation, safe transportation. So again, it goes back to the Unified Development Code and the Design Standards Manual. Not only do we need them, but we need them built right. Another example is the developer can build them, but guess what? It crumbles and falls apart. Roads and neighborhoods that you're familiar with, even out in the brand new south side, are already shot. So we're bringing that forward. In fact, later today I have a meeting on the initial policy to be brought to council soon on improving and strengthening the design standards. And then the Unified Development Code will dictate things like the sidewalk has to be in a neighborhood. It's not really a choice or an option type thing. So
Okay.
we're bringing that forward. We're aware of it
Good.
from
Great.
our prior experience, and we need to
Great.
bring those same codes that a lot of Texas cities have put on their books a long time ago.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you. Mr. Presley?
Yes, Mayor, you bring up an excellent point, and, you know, we have two areas out in District 1 where we've got already a significant issue on Rand Morgan Road with the Toloso Midway Intermediate School, and at one time there was just houses on new residential development on one side of Rand Morgan. Now they're going to the other side of Rand Morgan, so that problem's not going to get any better. And we brought this up, or I brought it up at a meeting here several months ago. And I said, we need to be engaged in the design of that subdivision and how, because if you don't, you're going to have an even worse traffic jam than you have there now. And a few years ago, Cal Allen proposed a new elementary school right off of 624. I went to the meetings, and city went to the meetings, and there was some disagreements between the city and the school district about how they're going to do it. Anyway, that school opened this morning, and there was a major traffic jam on 624. And I suspect that we're going to be getting phone calls about what are we going to do about the traffic jam on 624. So the mayor brings up an excellent point. We need to be engaged early on in these designs and how it gets done. But Rand Morgan is a classic example. We now have an opportunity to be involved from ground zero, and I hope we take advantage of that.
I'm sorry, yes, sir, Councilman Hernandez.
Is my light working?
No, I don't have you on.
How about now? Okay. So I'd like to.
Okay,
Throw me up.
I think you need to also get with Development Services because they'll do PUDs with, without the sidewalks, right? So, might want to get with Al Raymond to say we don't want any more PUDs where we don't have any sidewalks on both sides of the streets. Also, this would be actually in Councilman Barrera's district, but since we annexed County Road 33, and I believe Councilman Pusley copied me on an email, that would actually go to Councilman Barrera. The London High School, everything on that side of 43, west of 43 is going to be District 3. Yes.
Yeah.
But there's not, we annexed that road, and it's a county road with no sidewalks.
Right.
Right along and London, to their credit, I guess, built an elementary school on that county road that was barely wide enough to put one car through. But they extended their driveway to get to it. We might want to have some discussions with them about sidewalks and routes to school, because as that area develops behind London, there's going to be people walking down that County Road 33 in order to get to school. So it just one of those things. Vision Zero. And I agree with Councilman Molina that it's something ideal that we need to pay attention to as we're walking around. Again, my sidewalk over there by Grant Middle School,
Yes,
which I'm very proud of, by the way. Just need a curb there. Other than that, but thank you. I did want to ask one other question on the RTA funding that we get. I don't see where it's accounted for in the general fund or in the street CIP. Where is it accounted for?
Yeah, street fund.
It's in the streets fund, Councilman?
In the street fund?
Yeah, it goes directly into the streets fund.
So it's not separated out?
No, it's not separated out.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mayor?
Oh, yes, sir, yes. Roland. Councilman.
Anyway, Richard, going back to the recent discussion with regard to the safe routes to school, number one, I was going to actually commend your staff for I know the work that they did with Carroll High School, because I got on the tail end of that. And, what I like about that, and what I was going to basically interject, I agree with the component about the sidewalks. But the thing that we found, or I've seen that it's in the Northeast, is that they have these trails to pull the children away from the streets. And so I think that's something that I know that the MPO with their hike and bike trails, I know Jeff Pollack had done an amazing job to try and get that. I know the prior mayor was not a fan of hike and bike trails, and I know that really is the key is in order for that safety. And they came up with this great idea of running them along our ditch system, because that's basically away from, that puts them in a situation that they're in the neighborhood. And, in the book's Freakonomics, I think is where I read, is that individuals wouldn't mind if they're walking to be in a safer standpoint if it's a further distance, just to get away from all the exhaust and the high-speed traffic. So I'm sure you're working. I'm sure you're working with the MPO's plan.
So yes, sir, we are. And so there's mixed use paths, and then there's also, that's been brought up, what you just mentioned has been brought up by other council members. I've gone out and done tours to see if we can reroute some of the sidewalks in behind the neighborhoods where we have room by the drainage channels.
Yeah.
In some cases, that would have us actually have to put some walking bridges over the top of some of these channels, but that's possible. Again, and so we're looking at that as well in the future.
And the one, I think, a real success story is the Shannon Hike and Bike Trail. It goes from District 3 to District 5. It, of course, it gets along the sidewalk when it gets to Killarnett to get to Shannon Elementary. And then if there's a way that somehow or another, I think, a walking bridge over it to get to Tom Brown would be another great resource. And, when the pandemic first started, there were a ton of people out there walking those trails. So anyway, keep up the good work, and I'm glad you're working towards this. Thank you.
Thank
I don't know why I
you.
pressed
So
my
we'll
button.
continue. So enhancement number 5, it's a special events traffic control. So we do a lot of different special events. And so we just heard Beach to Bay was canceled this year. But there are events like Beach to Bay, Buck Days, Dia de los Muertos, Jazz Fest, Conquer the Coast. There are a lot of different events. And as COVID starts to reduce again, you'll see that these events are going to start again. And currently today, when we're doing traffic control, those come out of our budget. So we wanted to be able to just identify that as we move forward and what that cost would be, and move that into a line item so that we can be able to see what our expenditures are on a yearly basis. So enhancement number 6 is a pavement evaluation contract. So this is important. We talked about this earlier, and how do we get to the next level? How do we forecast where we are? We've got a pavement management system that was started by the Corps of Engineers. It was called Micropaver, and they changed that to Paver. We are 8 iterations behind on that system. And so that system can no longer be upgraded. We need to get to the next level. There are pavement management systems that are out there, out of the box, that can help us do that forecasting very easily. Today, we have to calculate it by hand. And so one of the things we're working with IT is to put this in place and be able to work with our pavement, work with our work order management system. And so this would evaluate all our streets again. So we have a contractor come and evaluate all our streets to get a new PCI network. And that's important. This rain that we just had accelerated our degradation, and we need to know where we are currently today. So this will add $1 million to be able to do that this year. That was one of the major initiatives the city manager gave me when I first got here. The number 7, a CDL pilot training program. This area is important for us because we want to make sure that we can partner with like Del Mar or other higher learning education areas so that we can be able to provide training for our employees to get CDLs. That's currently today the biggest area that we lack in to bring personnel in our service level areas. They don't have a CDL, and without a CDL, they don't qualify for our positions. So this is internally some of our positions that we want to be able to promote and then work on that process so that there's a process in place. We bring in people, train them, and keep them moving up in our program. So that's $14,000. It's a pilot program. You'll see that in the stormwater side too as I move forward. The next one would be a safety grant match. So taking a look at that, we actually apply to TxDOT every year for highway safety improvement programs, and we were able to get 3 projects in the next 3 years, and there has to be a match that goes along with that. And so we're asking for $100,000 to be able to do that. This will improve signals and signalized intersections for pedestrians and vehicles.
Excuse me, Mr. Yes, Mr. Martinez, Councilman Martinez.
Yes, Mr. Martinez, on the CDL program, I just wanted to talk about things that we talked about with the police academy and the fire academy. You know, I want to be able to avoid having people getting their CDLs and then going off and doing something else. So,
Right.
so in that program, I just asked that we consider like in the police academy and the fire academy, some kind of commitment to the city once they get their CDL under this program.
Yes, sir, and there'll be a 2-year commitment for that. Same thing as we have for our engineers when we're attracting engineers in. They have a 2-year commitment, or they have to repay that prorated on the time that they're here.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So enhancement number 9, traffic signal battery backup system, so installation program. So in this case, we'll be able to add 63 battery backup systems in our intersections, and they'll provide 4 to 6 hours of signalized.
Give an example.
We had the freeze
activity
when that went
during
down.
the time that we lose
So
power.
a lot of
Give an
our
exa-
system didn't have a battery backup, and the ones that did lasted 6 hours, but they gave us time to put a stop sign, a temporary stop sign up, again, improving safety. And so again, we want to get to that next level so that we lose power, and we do lose power based on AEP power outages, vehicle accidents, that type of thing. This would have our system stay on battery backup when that goes on. So again, very important for our program. Yeah, that's $600,000. Enhancement 10, fiber optic communication for traffic management system. Very important. Right now, 246 of our 252 signalized intersections do have communications through fiber optic. The other ones have what we call cell service that comes across, and that's spotty in some cases. We want to continue to do that and add those other 2 areas, which is across the Oso into Flower Bluff and onto the island. And then the other one would be Staples, La Pond, Baldwin Avenue area, which will give us fiber optic connection to our traffic management system. Be able to help now move it to the next level. Enhancement number 11, these are improvements along Northwest Boulevard. So for here, what we're going to look at is how do we improve medians, ditches, lighting, other infrastructure enhancements along that right-of-way. That's a big area that's booming in that area, and drainage is important there. So we've set aside $150,000 to start doing some work in that area. We're going to move into stormwater. Again, you see the organization. So in this area, I'm going to concentrate basically in street operations and stormwater operations. That's in Roland's area for stormwater, and in Gabriel's area in stormwater engineering as well. So our mission statement: protect life and property through proper stormwater conveyance while protecting water quality in our creeks, rivers, bays, and estuaries. Very important process. We've got a good starting point, but I think this is an area that we can definitely improve as we move forward. So about Public Works and what do we do? So again, last year, 19 months ago, it was consolidated. So there was areas in the Water Utilities Department, areas in Parks. Now they're in Public Works. So we've got 620 miles of stormwater ditches and channels. Very important that we maintain those properly so that we don't have, so that we can convey water through those areas and don't have any backups in the design channels that are currently out there. 674 miles of underground stormwater infrastructure. We really need to be inspecting that to see where we're going to have issues, or we need to improve those systems out there. Right now, you don't see them every day. You drive over the top of them. And then 20,000 inlets throughout the city that we have to keep clean, because those eventually get to our rivers and bays. So what were our achievements? I'm just going to go over a couple of these right now in the sake of time. So one of the biggest things that we did was develop a robust citywide street sweeping program, and we want to continue to build on that. And so currently today it's a contract, and we've got 2 sweepers of our own that we've been augmenting that contract and doing special events and that type of thing. So you'll see that we're, in one of the proposals, we're looking at trying to implement more in-house street sweeping.
Richard, the street sweeping, so we had none,
We had
right?
none.
And then this gives us what exactly?
This will give us another 2 sweepers. So we have 2 today, because we bought some last year.
Okay,
And this will give us another 2. And now we'll be able to do arterials on our own, double the arterials from going from 4 times a year to 8 times a year. So I'll give you an example. Everhart was just built, okay? We went out there, contractor cleaned it, said, okay, here, you bought it. We bought it. So they sold it to us. We went forward. Within a week, we had debris back out again. So that tells us, again, materials that are coming off the properties when it rains, that type of thing. You got to keep that clean, keep it from getting into the inlets. So over the last 2 months, we've been sending our sweepers out there on a daily basis, but you can go out again to Everhart and still see that there's debris along the curb line that we're generating. So a lot of debris, many years of not sweeping, and that's exactly all that's built up. And we need to continue to sweep to start getting that off and keep it from getting our inlets, because it'll eventually, you see siltation in the channels, that's exactly where it's coming from. It's either cutting in the channels or coming from our roadways. All the floatables that you see downtown that go into the bay, they start on our roads and get into our inlets and get into our channels that get into our bays. And we need to do more street sweeping. People think street sweeping is for streets. It is not. It's water quality. It's ensuring that we're keeping those contaminants out of our stormwater system. Another thing that we did this year was we upgraded the operating system in our pump stations. So we have 2 flood control pump stations downtown. They were built in the 40s. We had to have people operate 24/7 there. You had to flip a switch when it needed to run. Now today, it's an automated system. Yes, we still are able to monitor it, but it's an automated system that we don't have to have people there 24 hours a day. It will automatically operate, then call us and say, you got to get out here and take a look at this. Pumps are running, that type of thing. So again, getting these programs moving to the next level, which is important for us. So our proposed budget for stormwater is $17.8 million, and you'll see in a minute, after I finish the stormwater budget, we'll talk about the proposed standalone stormwater utility fee and how we get to $17.8 million. But you see the majority of that currently today is channel maintenance and restoration, and that's one work crew. That's one work group that includes a couple of excavators and a grade-all with the associated equipment that goes along with that. We need to really improve in that area. That's the area we need to make sure to add another work group in to make sure that happens. And you see concrete maintenance, vegetation, street cleaning in there, and how that's encompassed in that $17.8 million. So Enhancement 1, we just talked about that. Channel maintenance crew. This is where we double the amount of resources that we have in that work crew, okay? So I want to make sure that you understand a work crew consists of 2 grade-alls and then another grade-all that does bar ditches as well. And so that work crew, we want to actually double that so that we can add we'll have 4 grade-alls on the ground to excavate and maintain channels, and then 2 grade-alls that would be out doing bar ditches. Bar ditches are very important. One area of the city that needs that maintenance and cleaning is Flower Bluff. There's a lot of old infrastructure in there, a lot of pipe crossings for every home, and those areas need to be cleaned. Otherwise, you're going to start to get backup and those type of things. And so this work and this channel maintenance crew will help us get that done. And so it allows for our scheduled maintenance of Corpus Christi stormwater channels, ditches, and creekways. It's $1.1 million. Again, I use the phrase, yellow iron isn't cheap. And so we need to make sure that we continue to move this process forward. Enhancement 2, in-house street sweeping transition. So again, we have 2 sweepers today that we're using more on our stormwater system. We're going to transition them into a stormwater program and then get additional 2 sweepers. We're going to use vacant positions that we have currently today to operate those equipment. So we're not adding personnel to this, and this will go for us to be able to sweep our arterials 8 times a year versus 4 times at what we're doing today. We have a contractor here, it's Coastal Sweeping. They're trying to do their best to keep up, but they're seeing what we're seeing. When they're going through, they're filling their sweepers up immediately as they're running through the system, and they're having to continue to move back and forth and dump because there's a lot of material on our roadways. Enhancement number 3, again, the CDO pilot program. We're just making sure that we're adding this in the stormwater side as well as we did for streets, $14,000. Enhancement number 4 is public education and outreach. This is an important area, especially that we're proposing a standalone stormwater utility fee. And with that, we need to have the public education to allow and to let our citizens know why is the reasons why we're doing this, what are some of the important aspects of it, and this will allow us to get radio, cable time, billboards, print education and materials out for this. So a very important part of the stormwater program. And Enhancement 5 is a stormwater account reconciliation team. So we need to have staff members that are going to assist with that. So if we have a standalone utility fee, we need to have staff members that are going to help reconcile for the customers and maybe just give them information of what they were paying before, what they're paying today. And there's also going to be a utility assistance program that this group would also be able to help. This adds 1 full-time position, a manager, and it converts 1 vacancy that we currently have that we'll be able to utilize in that area. And the team ensures financial support and creates sustainable program. So again, this will give us an opportunity as we propose this to you, and any possible approval of that, then we'd be able to implement this.
We have a question, Councilman Pusley.
Yeah, this is for both Richard and Peter. On your public education outreach, I know the state here, right after all the rains, mowed the side of the freeway close to where I live. And my wife and I left one evening right after they mowed and drove along the frontage road, and we were absolutely astonished at the amount of trash that was ground up when they mowed. It was just amazing. We need to add to our public education and tell people what it is costing them to clean up that. Every time they roll down their window and throw their styrofoam cup out on the side of the road, somebody has to clean that up, and it's going to cost taxpayers to do that. And we need to remind them. We need to re-implement our, don't throw it out of your car window program again, and include that as part of our public education.
It's a very good point. And that starts, you know where that starts with? It starts with the elementary school children. You'll be surprised. You go to the school and you talk to them about that. They're the first ones that tell their parents, do not throw trash out your window because it causes this. So that is an area where we concentrate. In other stormwater organizations I've been in, we concentrated in the schools to get that across.
Well, and this should be part of our in-school recycling and environmental awareness. It's very important. Thank you, Councilman.
Sir.
And does staff, who has a comment? It says staff here, staff one? No? Okay, I don't know. Okay.
So enhancement number 6, stormwater crew quarters modular complex. Currently today, as we consolidated our crews, and now we're proposing to add additional crews, we need a location for our stormwater team to get together with and actually be able to actually be in the streets complex as well, so that not only can we share resources, but also there's better communication that goes along. And we do have room there to put one of these. And this is not just a modular building that you look at that you rent. This is something that's more robust, that actually has metal siding and metal roofs, that type of thing, that will last many years to come. And before we move forward on other service centers and that type of thing. So we need the facilities for our staff members to be able to have office spaces and crew quarters that have the proper amenities as well. So we're going to start talking about the proposed stormwater utility fee, a standalone stormwater utility fee. So why are we here? So I want to direct your attention to this slide. These are all recent pictures, okay? So this happened in the flooding in July and August, and they have a little bit, a gamut of about every single thing that occurred. So on the top left, you see water quality issues that came into the bay, that came as that first flush came out and continued to come out as our storm system was inundated. You'll see on the bottom, there's Flower Bluff. And we had homes that actually got water inside their homes. And we looked at what we needed to resolve that and their drainage systems. And we looked at immediately internally and said, what can we install and engineer quickly to get this out and alleviate? And there's a couple of options that we have to do that. But to be able to do that, we need to have a fee, or we need to have a revenue source that for us is that we can rely on a yearly basis and move forward with. If you look on the middle, there's water quality issues with the debris and trash. We have to have resources to get that off. Yes, we can put in those screens, but we need to have more resources to get it off and make sure that we're cleaning those areas in a timely fashion. And then in the bottom right, you see channels, and you see these channels all over the city that still hold water. Councilman Hernandez and I have gone through his district, and he has multiple channels that look exactly like this. We can't get so close to the edge because they're holding water. We need to get in there and maintain that properly, regrade them so they're not holding water, and they can take the capacity that they were originally designed for. And again, one of those improvements was to exactly tackle that situation, to be able to add more resources there. But there's a lot of flooding issues that need to happen, a lot of water quality issues that need to happen, and a lot of maintenance issues that need to continue to occur, and of where we are today and moving forward in the future as well. This is where it starts.
Councilman Hernandez, he has a question. Comment?
Sorry, Richard, I wanted to get you before you started on your finance portion. But there's some questions I had regarding we had talked about retention ponds that are, I have a lot of private ones in
Yes.
District 5 that are part of our drainage system, right? The street drainage goes right into these retention ponds. We also have some public ones, right? The Lakeview Park, where we have a retention pond there. I believe even Oso and Gabe Luzano have some water features that act as retention ponds, but we don't really have a means to address those within our, stormwater system. Obviously, retention ponds over time get silted up.
That's correct.
So I noticed you didn't have anything here in your presentation for that. I was wondering if you could address that.
Sure. So that would be something that we'd look at in the future. Currently today, especially the private ones, and I do understand your point. Stormwater has no boundaries. Goes through, comes off our roads, gets in those areas. They need to be maintained and cleaned. And you and I have both seen those that need to be dredged out and cleaned up. And so currently in our budget there is not any funding going towards that area, but in the future that definitely could be one of those areas. We also looked at the dredger that is owned by the utilities department, and that will not work for what we need to be able to do. Yeah. It's very small, and the piping that came along with it isn't enough to get it out there. And it's basically a pontoon system that has to be moved with a cable system through that area, so it won't work for what we need to do. It won't be able to dredge out. That's more like for, let's say, a wastewater settling pond that would just get nothing but silt out. When you're dealing with the those retention ponds that you're talking about, you're going to get debris and everything else with it. Because I've run one of those programs before, need a bigger dredger. In some cases, even a dredger won't work. You've got to go in and put a man-made dam in and excavate those out, one half to the other. So you do one half, put a dam in, excavate the other half, then move the water over and do the same thing so you don't completely dry out those areas. It's a major undertaking. That would be a major initiative in the stormwater program to take on those areas in the future.
Well, that's not a good thing.
It would be a major undertaking, sir.
Well, I guess it'd be better to do an evaluation of it now because they are part of our stormwater system, whether we like them or not. And so I want to make sure that we have at least something going forward to look at how we could improve that. If not, they're going to be useless over a period of time. Okay. The other question I wanted to ask you quickly was when you were talking about traffic lights, one of the biggest complaints I get is that they're not sequenced. And can you address that in terms of sequencing traffic lights as you're going down a major arterial?
Different corridors.
Right.
So taking a look at that, so communication is the first to make sure we have communication in those areas. So concentrating on that, that's what we're trying to finish up this year. But looking at that in the future where we do have communication, so doing signal timing in those corridors are important. And so that's an initiative that we're looking at to move forward with and how we ensure that the corridors are moving at the right pace if they parallel each other or if they're crossing each other. So that's our next initiative to go and look forward.
Okay, so give me a timeline as to when we can get because it seems like,
Right.
as a modern city, we should have our traffic lights sequenced to where
Sure.
you don't.
So let me clarify that. So they're sequenced to a point as they're running down a corridor. So in other words, when you go from one block to the next block to the next block, they're sequenced to the point where you go through. What we're talking about is sequencing an entire corridor compared to an oncoming corridor and a parallel corridor. That process would take us about 12 to 24 months to make sure that we can go through, evaluate it, make sure our systems are in
Do our
place to be able to do
current
that.
traffic lights have the capability to do this?
They do.
Okay,
They
it's
do.
just that there's no communication between them.
In some of them, there's no
So
communication.
when can we get communication between, at least for the arterials?
So we're working on it this year. We'll finalize the communication in this fiscal year. And then we'll be able to work on, so we're also looking at, and I know I'm probably adding more to it, but preemption for our fire
Special
trucks
events
and that type
or-
of thing.
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that all works with the corridor timing and working through there. And it also, we need to go back through and look at a study and see how many vehicles are going from point A to point B and what locations they need to go to.
Okay, so 24 months
12 to 24 months, sir. Yes,
to where we get to that point.
yes, sir. That's the
Okay.
next concentration. So
Okay.
we've got low-hanging fruit, been popping that low-hanging fruit off, and we're getting to that point where you're talking about today.
Okay, and you did mention this in your discussion, but in terms of the percentage of streets that are being done by district, is that still the same?
Yes, it is still basically the same. There's 19% in your district, sir.
No, I'm not getting 19%. I'm getting like 16%.
No, on average, this, like in this 2000, in 2026, you're getting 19%.
In 2026, I'm getting
Yes, sir.
19%, but that's not what we're discussing this year. This year is 2022, right? So what,
So that was approved in the first IMP proposal. So we're trying to make sure that we're putting the maintenance on, based on pavement condition and need through that.
okay, but we're talking about funding for this year, for this coming year, right?
Yes, sir.
So the funding for this coming year, District 5 is only getting 16%, correct?
It's still in the same percentage. So if we increase the funding, it's still stay in that same percentage moved up.
Okay, that's why I wanted to verify that.
Yes, sir.
And lastly, you had mentioned you wanted to buy those modular buildings, but as I understand, you're right next to the solid waste building, correct?
That is correct.
Will they be vacating that building once they construct their facility out near J.C. Elliott?
I believe they will, but I'm not sure. They may be using it for something else.
Yeah,
That building still isn't big enough for us, sir. I use part of that building, half of it, for administrative services. So it would not be able to take my crew quarters or anything like that that need to go in.
Right. I think they had plans for it, Councilman, but it's in bad repair. That's one of the reasons why they're moving out. There's some
So,
foundation
well, I just
problems.
want to know if we're going to do something with it. I mean, it's right next to his building.
Yeah, we are.
And
We'll try
if-
to get you by the end of this meeting what that is.
If it's something that's going to be, vacant when,
No, it won't be
or
vacant.
solid waste isn't going to use it anymore, and we have that facility there.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some plans to repair it when nobody's in there,
Right.
and then have, either streets or stormwater, reuse it instead of buying something new. Just want to make sure we're not wasting opportunities to
Yeah,
reutilize.
and I have all confidence that that's part of,
Right.
in operations, that's what you would do. Definitely utilize something that can be utilized.
Right, right.
Right,
yes.
and just, sometimes we work in silos, and so I just want to make sure that that's
Yeah,
part
we
of it.
try to work as a team as much as we can. I have the answer, I just don't have it at the top of my head, but we'll get it for you by the end of this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Smith.
Thank you, and thanks. You can obviously see all the work that you and your staff have done. It's a great job, and on my time on council, I know we are improving at Viola Creek. All these rains, we didn't have the problems because we've improved that on there. Williams Ditch, just that little bit of maintenance we did on Williams Ditch, and I know further enhancements on there, and in the bluff, we're making progress. So thank you, but we need to make more. There's no doubt about it. Councilman Hernandez's comments about going in and maintenance on private systems with it. Well, we know whether our water system connects to private systems, our sanitary sewer system connects to private systems, our drainage connects to private systems. We need to be very careful crossing those boundaries. We're opening up a Pandora's box on there. I had something from a citizen on there that was cited for the curbs on an arterial street. So this is city-owned property, yet it's a responsibility of that owner. And so if we're going to be venturing in the private side of our systems, whether it's our water system, our sanitary sewer system, or our stormwater system, we need to be careful. I think what we need to do is have requirements that those are maintained on it, because that's typical with all of our infrastructure on there, that you have to maintain it at its entry point there with it. So just a follow up on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Go.
I just want to mention that on something like that, with the costs that he's referring to, we may be owning those retention ponds. They may just tell them, "Here, it's yours. Stop paying taxes on them."
So I'd like to draw you back to this
Yes.
slide. Okay, so the reason why we're here is because we have these issues
Right.
across the city, and we want to improve our program. And so how do we do that? And how do we control our own destiny to make that happen? So when we did that, we took a look at statewide stormwater implementation. So we looked at the top 7 cities above us and 1 city below us, and looked at when they implemented their standalone fee. So if you look at Dallas, it was in 1991 when they implemented their standalone fee. San Antonio was 1993. Austin was 2003. El Paso was 2006. Houston was 2011. Fort Worth was 2012. Arlington, 2014. And you see Corpus Christi, although we do get stormwater funding out of our water utilities fee, we don't have a standalone fee currently today. Plano, that's below us, established theirs in 2013. So why are we here? Tell me why we're here. Well, when I got here, one of the big major initiatives that our city manager did is said we need to make sure that we bring this city to the next level. And stormwater is a big issue, and we had not faced a major flood coming in here. Stormwater utilities and stormwater programs, they're great until you face a great flood, and then everyone asks, what have you been doing? Why haven't you done this? So our planning is important, and we need to plan that up front and let you know what are the issues that we have and give you the information so you can make the best decision. So we are the last major city to establish a standalone stormwater fee in Texas, the last major city to do that. And we understand why. It's difficult because of where the stormwater funding is actually placed today, and it's difficult to transition into an impervious cover area. So I understand why we're standing here today. But we need to look at that and see whether or not we want to continue the process of where we are, or do we want to improve. So if you look at stormwater programs, they vary by region. So if you look at it and say, oh, well, Dallas does this, San Antonio does this, Houston does this, they vary on the amount of stormwater they get and the type of stormwater they get. So one of those areas, if you look at, and I'm going to talk about one that I just came from, Fort Worth, they get a lot of flash flooding, they have a lot of low water crossings, so they concentrate in low water crossings and high water detection systems. They're actually put in car catchers, as San Antonio did, to catch vehicles from getting pushed into drainage systems. And they look at underground systems and detention ponds to make sure that that slows that down. And if you look at Austin, they're more environmental quality. They're looking at what they need to do to make sure that when they have density of development and they're coming in their channels and creeks, they want to keep their creeks natural. How do they keep that environment clean? Houston is relatively kind of like us, flat, and they have a lot of bayous. They spend a lot of money on bayous and channels and maintaining those areas. And San Antonio, of course, they're flash flood alley. And in those areas, they've actually incorporated flood control tunnels that go up under the city that protect that, dam structures, levees systems, and that type of thing. But those were all funded through the stormwater program to make sure that they're protecting the infrastructure and the citizens that live in those areas. So again, all different types of programs, varying on what your stormwater is in your area. But we're looking at what we need is a dedicated fee that allows proper maintenance and long-term planning for our stormwater system. Not just today. You'll hear today that we're looking at in the next 5 years, but we need to be looking 10 years, 20 years down the road as well. So again, we're here today because we are the last city to implement a standalone. I want to make sure that phrase is out there, a standalone stormwater fee. So what is the objectives of our stormwater fee? So one of them is, yeah, we need to remove it from the water rate so we have financial transparency. Today, I'll tell you, after the city manager proposed this in the budget, we got a lot of calls. And a lot of calls were, I don't want a new stormwater utility fee. Well, a lot of the residents did not know that they pay currently in the water bill for stormwater. based on the amount of water that they use. So that information, we talked about public information, that's going to be important to get out there to individuals to know how they currently pay today and what they would pay tomorrow if we did implement this. So today, the fee is based on water consumption. So how much water you use, the more water you use, the more you pay towards stormwater. So heavy, high water users pay more towards stormwater than the low water users. It doesn't correlate to drainage runoff. It doesn't correlate to the amount of impervious cover that someone is generating off their property. It correlates only to the amount of water you use. It doesn't matter what size property you have today. And this also will create a stable revenue stream to maintain and improve our system. This allows us to know that every year we have to come back to you and look at and say, these are the improvements that we want to make. Here's the fee structure. Can we move this forward on a yearly basis? So let's talk about the current fee structure. But with that, I want to talk about current customer impacts. So currently today, since we're funded through basically water usage, I want to tell you about water connections and types. So out of the water connections, 91% of them are residential water connections in the city, and 9% are commercial. And so you see that the majority of the connections will be residential and will impact residential currently today. But the estimated impervious cover, if you look at the center circle, the pie chart, the estimated impervious cover by type, 2/3 are non-residential. So the more runoff is coming from non-residential commercial than is coming from our residential customers. But how do we pay for it? On the right side, currently today, it's almost half, just a little less than half residentials are picking up the amount of funding that we currently get today versus our non-residential or our commercial as well. And then 3% on large volume users are also contributing there. So our next slide, we go over to existing rate structure. So I need to show you this. And there are mixed reviews on this section. But I'm going to be the first one to tell you today, it's just me and my wife in the house that we live in. And out of the year, 8 months out of the year, I use less than 2,000 gallons a month. So I pay no stormwater. I pay nothing. I don't contribute into the stormwater fee, into the fund. So out of that residential, there are 18% of residential customers that pay zero towards the stormwater program currently today. And 30% of non-residential customers pay zero towards the stormwater program. I know that that's going to impact, it's going to be impactful in those areas, but there are some things that we're looking at trying to reduce that impact to them over this first year. But that's an area they're generating stormwater runoff, and that's an area we need to look at. So the next one is parcels without water meters. So this one is an area we need to look at as well. There's some examples of that. So there are some parcels that have had, they could be a place where where they store cars, vehicles, that type of thing, or have a shop in. But you see they have roof lines, or they have created pavement structures that are actually having runoff, but they have no water meter today. So 5% of all the parcels in Corpus Christi with impervious cover are without water meters. So today, they contribute zero towards stormwater at all. So 5% of that. That totals between 12 and 14% of the total impervious cover in our city, which is a lot. And if you look at that, that could generate about $2 million in funding in that area there too. So we're looking at that as well. So our proposed rate structure. So how do we start here? How did we get to a point where we're going to be able to calculate that? So we looked at a residential unit. So what is an equivalent residential unit? So a house, a property. What is the median in Corpus Christi? So we look at an industry standards to take a random sample. And so we took a random sample of 400 properties to come up with what that calculation is. And so that calculation is 3,280 square feet. So that's what we're saying, that a tier 2 property would run, and I'll talk about tiers in a minute, tier 1, 2, and 3, would have an average of about 3,280 square feet of impervious cover, which includes driveways, roof lines, sidewalks, those type of things that will not run into the yards. So that number is important because that's the basis of what we're looking at when we're charging tiers and when we're charging for non-residential customers as well. So, and we'll talk about the tiers in a second, but again, we put them in 3 different tiers: Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Tier 1 would be 0.75% of that. Tier 2 is that area, and Tier 3 would be something like a larger estate home or large properties. So when we go to non-residential, it gets a little more complex. And so you have to look at what they're actually running off and how is that equivalent to a residential unit. Not just, we have to equate it back to something. So we look at an intensity of development factor. And I'll give an example. There was one that came up this over the last couple of weeks, and that was agriculture. So agriculture came in and they said, we have a lot of fields in Corpus Christi. And so how does that apply to me? So come in and take a look at that. Agriculture is actually 0.05% intensity runoff, which means 99.5% actually goes into the ground, doesn't come off the property. And so with that intensity factor is calculated very small. But when you're talking about acreage, there's a lot of acreage out there. But we looked at it and said, if there are no taxable improvements on that land, so anybody that's just farming their land and no taxable improvements, they're exempt from the stormwater fee. They will not pay a stormwater fee because their property actually will soak in most of the stormwater that goes in. But if there's a taxable improvement like a home or barns, that type of thing, then that would apply and for the stormwater fee. So, just the area, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So when you look at that, you look at intensity development factor. So a home is 50%, 0.50 of the development factor. So that factor comes into place when we came up with the 3250. So if anybody wanted to know where they landed in tiers, they can take their property size, divide it by 2, and they'll know what tier they're in when they go through that. So what we're trying to do is equate that to impervious cover for a non-residential area. So you take the parcel, times the factor, the intensity factor, divide that by 3280. That gets you an equivalent residential unit. So on the bottom, you see an agriculture example. 22 acres. You have to convert that over into square feet, so 43,560 an acre. And then you times that times 0.05, and you divide that by 3280, because 3280 is what an ERU, an equivalent residential unit, and that comes out to 14.6 ERUs. What that means is 14.6 homes can fit on that property that we looked at would run off equivalent than 14.6 homes would. Then you times that times 612, what our proposed fee is, and it would be $89.35 a month. Now again, if they had an improved area through that area, that's the way that would be calculated. This does not calculate if they have no taxable improvements out there. And this is done for shopping centers. This is done also for large industrial complexes, that type of thing. The same type of intensity factor. Now, the largest intensity factor we have is 0.85. That would be a Walmart. That would be an industrial area that had everything but roof lines, and concrete. And we're still giving a percentage for just in case they do have some vegetation or that type of thing. So it's 0.85 runoff, but that's the most amount of runoff that you have in our tiers. So that's the basis of that. So let's go back to residential. So how do we calculate that? We looked at whether you could do a flat rate or do a tiered rate structure. And we felt a tier rate structure was a fairer process. So again, in the tier 1, it's less than 3,000 square feet. At this point, there's 16% of the parcels in that area. So they would be charged 0.75 of the 612 to come up with their monthly bill. A tier 2 would be the 3,000 to 4,500. So again, it lands in that 3,200, it's an ERU. And there 58% of the parcels land in that area. And that would be charged 1 ERU, which is 612. And that would be their bill. And at Tier 3, these are lot sizes with homes that are greater than 4,500 square feet. They're 26% in that area, and they'd be charged 1.75 of a 612, so they would pay a little more money. But I also want to be clear, vacant lots with no improvements they're exempt from that fee. They do not pay. If you have a vacant lot and then your lot is platted where you have a home and you have a second lot, that second lot is not included in the fee, only where the home is sitting today. So again, we feel that the tier system is a fair process. Currently today, we're charging our customers based on their water usage. And for us, we're looking at how do we make sure that it's a fair process across the board of what you're discharging into the system. So here's our 5-year stormwater program plan. And so I want you to just look at fiscal year 22, because that's where we are today, and that's what we're asking you to review for possible approval for this year. So our base program is $15.74 million, and then the improvements that we feel that we need to start with to take us to the next level is about $2 million. So that brings us to 17.75. The fee structure you see below for Tier 1 rate at $4.59 for those properties that were under 3,000 square feet. Residential rate of Tier 2 with 3,000 to 4,500 square feet is $6.12, and that's the average ERU. And then residential Tier 3 would be $10.71 for those large lots or state homes. And then the residential rate would be $6.12 per ERU when you calculate that out for impervious cover. That would generate our $17.75 million and the fee that works with that. So 23, 24, 25, and 26. In a minute, I'll talk about the improvements that go along with 22 and why it's at that level. 23, 24, 25, and 26 would be adding additional improvements as we go along through the program, adding an additional work group to do more maintenance channels, to go from 2, we're asking for the second one this year, to go to another one, which would be 3 in future years. And then adding additional components, and we'll look at that. But I want to bring you to one example. In 2025, you see at $29.3 million. Today, right now, we're proposing to start fresh with our own debt service as we move along. And so if we started today with the current debt service that went on, we'd be starting at a fee of almost $10 for the middle area there. But we're starting fresh again because we want to start a program and start it from scratch and really move it forward over the next 4 to 5 years. But again, I want to bring this to you. You have control of this, not us. We propose it to you, but we got to give you a plan of where we're going and how we're going to get there.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Here. So are you going to tell us here in a minute how residents are going to save on their water bill?
Yes, I'll get to that point.
Okay,
Yes,
all
sir.
right, good deal. So I won't ask you now.
Thank you, Richard. Councilman Barrera and I had visited with a business here in town that we believe is an outlier. They have a large footprint, and they are a low water user. And one of their concerns was that their stormwater fee was going to be a tremendous amount more than what they had anticipated. But then visiting with you, and we have another meeting set up with them, they were using a different set of calculations. And then so when we had gotten some numbers from you, from your office, it showed that their stormwater fee was going to be nowhere near what they had calculated themselves. Is there a way that property owners can run their own calculator? Is there a calculator that will be available online that people can use to kind of prepare or see what the difference is going to be?
Yes, that's a very good point, and we're working on that currently today to be able to do that calculator for them, to be able to do that for property owners. Right now, currently, we've had them contact us, and we've run the numbers for them and gotten back with them, especially on their on a strip mall, that type of thing. And so some of the questions we got, Councilman, was currently I am a strip mall owner, and I have 50 tenants, but I have 30 meters. Well, again, the meters are not really going to count this time around. What they're going to be able to do is see what they paid before. What we're going to be able to do is to go back through and say, here are the square footage of your area, and this is what the charge would be. And if you're the owner of that, then you can split that up into all of your tenants that currently pay for stormwater as you go through that process. There's a lot of different ways we can look at it. So we can put a calculator on that will help for someone that you talked about that we're going to be meeting with tomorrow, to be able to let them look at that and see exactly what that calculator is. And that tenant you're talking about, or that business owner you're talking about, we actually had capped. So there was a cap on our ERUs. So the maximum cap you can have is 500 ERUs. That tenant actually calculated out at 600 ERUs. So they were actually capped down to 500. But there are other things we can look at. So if that cap is at 500 and the next available one below them or in the 400 range, we can look at that, or we can look at utility assistance with them, depending on how our meeting goes tomorrow and some of the issues that they have. But you bring up one that's on the far end of the pendulum that is, yes, a low water user, but has a high impervious cover discharge. And so they are the ones that, we'll see the biggest difference when we're looking at that today. But what I want to be able to say, and no fault of their own, there's no fault of their own, of the business owner, of how it was calculated before. But currently, what was happening is there was another area of the residents and business owners that were actually picking up that portion of stormwater for that one component of business. Because it's no fault of that business. It's just the way that the calculations were put and how to calculate stormwater. But yes, that business would be impacted, and those are the ones we're looking at, the high impact properties that are out there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
On maybe I'm just not understanding this well enough, but on the non-residential rate, that's based on the residential rate to some extent, right? So they're getting the benefit of the 50% of the impervious cover, even though they average on some of them 90% runoff.
That's correct. What we're doing is we're saying we have to bring it back to an ERU, an equivalent residential unit. We have to bring it back to that residential unit.
But they're not equivalent. Why do we have to bring it back? If the usage is almost double what a residential is, then why do we have to bring it back to that?
So just to take a look at, we've got to have a system that we're able to do that. We can't charge them for a complete 100%. That's why the intensity of development has that percentage in. And so you got to have a standpoint to start with. And we looked at industry standards, and industry standards that's the way that it's been put in place in most cities.
And also with regard to the cap, it doesn't seem fair to cap a refinery or something that has tons of land with impervious cover throughout, when the residents are paying full rates for theirs. Is there a way to separate the non-residential rate to industry and other commercial type operations?
There is, yes. And so we have that separated out currently today.
But is it the same rate, or the rate's different?
It's calculated the same way with ERUs, but again, it's the intensity of development that gives you that different rate calculation for the amount of money that they're actually, or amount of impervious cover they're going to run off. And so the cap is just so that when we go back through, that there's not a bill that someone's getting that could be $14,000 or $15,000 a month.
But wouldn't that be reasonable for a refinery?
I mean, it could be. It could be. So a refinery, though, may be using a lot of water today, and they may not even see the difference when we change the rate.
I had requested, pardon me, Mayor, if I may, I had requested a report of all properties that would be exceeding, what was it, $15,000?
$20,000 a year, sir, you
Yeah,
said.
$20,000 a year, what I requested, and then they provided one for me at $15,000. And none of industry was on there. And the reason being is because of the amount of water consumption that they had. I know in particular, my representative was from the CCISD, And I was concerned because of all the impervious cover that they have. But their consumption because of their chillers of water is great. Therefore, their impact was going to be low. So that's really, if they're a high utilizer of water, hence the argument that our former councilman has brought up online, is that if you have an individual that has a larger lot, has a pool, they're utilizing quite a bit of water, they're going to end up getting a credit. So anyway.
So also, just to let you know that our refineries are not in the city limits as well. So they don't pay currently today.
Yeah, they're not paying, most of the probably the majority, if not all, the refineries are outside the city limits. We talked about that payment in lieu of taxes, the pilots. So they've either have been annexed out of the city or they were never in the city. So because they're not in the city limits, they won't pay a stormwater fee going forward.
That's correct.
Councilman Pusley.
So that's one point. The other point is, by law, most of the refineries have to collect their stormwater anyway, and they actually file for permits to dispose of that stormwater in the Inner Harbor or wherever they're located. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Did you have something, Greg?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Councilman Martinez. I'm struggling a little bit with how you calculate this EUR and the, what'd you call the other one, Richard?
The intensity development factor?
Yeah, the intensity
So
development.
the intensity development factors are industry standard, and that's what our engineers use when someone's building a neighborhood. And so they go back through, they look at those intensity development standards. It's not something that we developed, it's been developed out there. And then you apply those intensity development factors towards that. So homes are 0.50, and I took the slide out, we had it in here, yeah. And so I can definitely email you the slide that has those intensity development factors in there. In the sake of time, we did remove some of the slides that were in here that had some of the backup on that. Yes, sir. So I want to talk about the stormwater improvements that get us to that point. So for 2020, we talked about increasing, one of our enhancements is to increase street sweeping and increasing arterials from 4 times to 8 times a year. Removing contaminants off of our stormwater system, off the roads before they get into our stormwater system. Very important. So this would add additional 2 sweepers, which would use the current 2 and add the other 2. Additional channel and ditch maintenance crew. So this is, again, adding additional crews that we could include to maintain those channels that need to be maintained today. Right now, with one work group, we're not able to get to all those channels in a timely fashion. We're going to look at adding a second work group to be able to double our resources. In the 23 to 26, there's an additional one that's in that time frame as well. So again, to fund that, we would need, of course, a fee increase as you're looking at moving forward. But again, talking about 22, there's the reconciliation team, which was the $115,000 that we need to make sure that we have that group in there to be able to help our customers with that. There's the IDIQ construction contract. So here is where we're looking at adding debt service in here. So this is examples of Williams Ditch, Glen Oak. These are actually stormwater projects that we would need to do to accomplish. There's other ones out there. This is not what we're talking about to support streets. So when streets bond projects come up, we have to have that support as well. This is strictly for stormwater improvements. And then we have to go through and look at our stormwater system and televise and inspect our underground system. Today, we don't have an inspection program, and we need to really put one in place. This last rains that we got, we had a lot of collapses that went through because we had misaligned pipes that as soon as they got charged fully, it pushed through and started to come through. One of the areas that I'm sure you're all aware of is the Oso Boulevard, and that area has 3 golf cart pass through there, and the last rains we had went through. It had been damaged over years, but went through and actually pushed down the dirt that was up in there, and now we started getting collapses on the street, so we had to go in and plate that, and we're looking at trying to find out how we're going to do that repair in the future. So again, needing to know what's there. and what do we need to do to improve our program. Those are of what we need to start with, and those are the $2 million of improvements. The major portion of that is the ditch crew that we're looking at for those $2 million of improvements, and that's what we're proposing in 22. 23 to 26, we would continue the street sweeping transition to go completely in-house over those years. And so with that, we'd be able to increase residential sweeping from 2 times to 4 times a year. And so again, removing debris in front of someone's home, which is important. Our street sweepers, I started seeing on Facebook where some of our residents were coming through and say, did I just see a street sweeper go by our house? I saw that many times, and I was tagged on it many times, and I said, yes, you did. You did see a street sweeper go by your home. So we're seeing some improvements, but are we satisfied where we are today? No, definitely not. And there's some hard decisions that have to be made to continue to improve the programs. We needed to improve our inlet cleaning inspections. So we want to go from a 3-year program to a 2-year program, and that adds resources, inlets to be able to clean and inspect them. So more vacuum induction trucks. An additional street and ditch crew. And then vegetation maintenance. We need to add herbicide in. So there are a lot of, you see right now we're mowing medians. Well, for us is we need to also put something down that we're going to control the level of the height of those, the grass, and especially in our drainage channels. And medians that don't have grass have concrete with weeds sticking up in the middle of those areas. And then we need to improve our IDIQ contract as well. We need to continue to move that up from the $6 million base to continue to move that to be able to do more things. And then creek monitoring and high water detection. But creek monitoring is important on the OSO. The last rains we got with Lavoya, we had the National Weather Service, great organization, help us with that and give us the estimates that we need to go. And the first thing they said is it would be nice if we had more rain gauges to be able to track the levels down the OSO, because that's the one that we have significant flooding down when we get rain up in Robstown, Cal Allen, in those areas through the city coming out on Oso Bay. And so we're looking at trying to improve that, putting in more rain gauges so we can tell what's going on there and what work needs to be done. And then continue our bay water quality improvements. So how do we put in more netting, more catch basins so that we don't get all of the, and again, and I'll just say convenience store cups that go out into the street, restaurant cups, those type of things, because you saw that picture showed up there. There were a lot of cups, styrofoam cups and things like that, and trash. Those are called floatables. We need to get those floatables out of our system, and that's where we need to improve there. So customer impacts, and I'm going to try to get through these quickly. So here is 2 homes, and one of them is at 5,500 square feet, and the other one's at 15,000 square feet. One of them would be in Tier 1, and one of them would be in Tier 3. So if you look at today based on the gallons of water, now I want to just illustrate how gallons of water used today affects how they pay for water. So they use 10,000 gallons. They'd be paying $28.50 towards stormwater today. The 15,000 square feet, maybe there's just like me and my wife that live there, and they use under 2,000. So they pay 0 right now currently towards stormwater. But they're in Tier 1 and Tier 3. So Tier 1 would go down to $4.59, which you're never going to hear from those residents. You'll never hear from them. They're just going to be like, okay, I got a reduction. But we definitely will hear from Property B because they're used to not seeing an increase, and now it's 1071 because they're in Tier 3. Again, this is the residential pendulum that we're talking about, which you talked about earlier, which is the commercial side. This is the residential pendulum that goes on, based again on what the water usage was, not on the amount of discharge that's coming off their property. Water usage. And so it goes from one extreme to the other based on the water usage. But we think this is fair. It's fair what you're discharging off into that area. And we'll talk about this utility assistance program that will help in some of these cases. So here's an example. So here we're proposing, and we heard from a lot of constituents in this area about, I'm on a fixed income, or I'm over 65, that type of thing, or I'm disabled. So we looked at it and said, all right, what are the criteria? So we looked at age, over 65, low income, and also, disability. So if you have a disability as well. So on the right, you'll see, we put a calculator together, and we were going to put this online as well so everybody can see this. So on the left-hand side, you'll see your water usage. So everybody can go to their bill and see what they're averaging and they use. And so it starts on the left, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. And it shows what their water bill was before, their current water and stormwater rate together, because it's included together in the calculations. And then to the right, you'll see proposed water, stormwater with water, again, because you have to take apples with apples, and taking a look at what they would have paid together now, and it goes on the tiers. And so if you look at the difference, you'll see it's $4.39, $5.92, and $10.51 for Tier 2, because remember, they paid nothing towards stormwater before. In the red that you see there would be the areas that would qualify for the utility assistance program, those on Tier 1 and Tier 2 properties. And they go all the way up to 6,000 gallons, because 6,000 gallons, the Water Utilities Department is reducing their water rate by 612, so that when we're adding the 612 in for that same user, you'll see 6,000 gallons for Tier 2, it's 0. Anything above 6,000 gallons, there's a savings for every customer that's above 6,000 gallons. Again, equating to the heavy water users, we'll see a reduction down. The lower water users will see an impact, but we have a utility assistance program that will help the Tier 1s and Tier 2s by that amount that you see there. And in the red, they would qualify to apply for that. And that's why we need our utility assistance group and our compliance group that can help these citizens work through that process. So that was a way that we looked at to see how we could assist in the changes of the bills that would happen coming forward. I'll sit here for a second because I know there may be some questions before I move on.
Councilman Molina?
Thank you, Mayor. I just need some clarification. In here, you have on the column to the left, water usage, and then further in, you have it broken down into tiers. So is it tiers within tiers?
No, so what would happen was, so if you look at, if you're a 2,000 gallon user, let's just look over to that one, 2,000 gallon user, you'd currently, again, it's a combined rate, so you would pay $15.06 for the amount of water, and then it has no stormwater included in that rate because you're under 2,000 gallons today. So if you look at now the new proposed rate, we had to put them together so that we could calculate apples and apples. It's now 19, for Tier 1, it's now $19.45. So the difference that they would be paying in stormwater is $4.39.
So I'm looking back on this slide here.
Mm-hmm.
Your Tier 1 on this slide is those users that have less than 3,000 square foot.
Yes,
Okay, so
it'd be the smaller homes, the smaller properties.
got it. Okay, I get it now.
And then the Tier 2 would be the average, what we look at, which would be the average home, which the equivalent residential unit was applied to. And that difference in the stormwater rate they would pay was $5.92, because remember, they paid no stormwater before. And the way the calculation works out, it doesn't work out exactly to that point of 612. So we had to put them together with the water rate to make it equal.
Okay, I understand. So I was confusing the tiers on the right hand of this with the water usage, but that's actually square foot of the property.
Yes, that puts them in the
Got
square
it.
footage of their homes. So what we wanted to do is to say, what do you pay today? And then tomorrow, if you're in a tier, where does that land you? And so you'll see in some cases, and I'll go with 5,000 gallons user, if you're in a Tier 1, you're actually going to save 5 cents if you're a 5,000 gallon user in Tier 1. If you're in Tier 2, it's $1.48 more than what you're used to paying today. But you're eligible for utility assistance program if you meet that criteria. And Tier 3, because you're a larger home, you'll pay $6 more. But as you move up the water, as the water table, because we went up to 10,000 gallons, there was significant savings as you continue to go up the water table. Again, because we're calculating today based on the amount of water we use, not on the amount of runoff that we're putting out there. And they don't correlate. And I wish they would a little more, because it would make our job much easier. This is significant amount that time we've spent on it in the last couple of years. And I know this council and councils before you have spent many, many hours and time on this same subject, but it comes down to the same thing. Because of the way that it was put in the water rate, and you'll see in a minute, no other cities put it in their water rate.
Mayor.
Came off a tax base.
Yeah, hey, Richard, if I can, we have another slide that we can show too. It's on slide 77. I don't know if you can advance to that, Richard?
Yes, sir.
This one just focuses on the tier 2 customer, right? Remember, there's 3 tiers, but this, we'll walk you through this since we're on it. We're going to have,
Oh, that's
Richard,
going to be, that actually got moved to,
it did?
that got moved to the water.
We have a couple of
Right, I know,
questions.
but move to it. Go to slide 77 if you can, even though it's in water.
Slide what? Page?
77.
I can't see.
Let's just walk through this real quick, so, because we broke it out here so you can see. Okay, so this shows the same thing, starting from the far left is the amount of water they use per month, 2,000, 3,000, 4, 5, and 6,000. The next column, water bill monthly change, so there's a decrease in the water bill, right? 20 cents, $1.68, $3 decrease, $4.64 decrease, and then $6.12 decrease for the 6,000 gallon customer. This is per month. And the next column is the monthly stormwater fee that they would see separate. So if you stay at that 6,000 water user, you can see the water bill decreases by $6.12, new stormwater fee of $6.12. So it's a net zero, right? They pay zero. If you had 5,000 gallons of water used, you're going to see a $4 decrease, $4.64, increase of $6.12, so a $1.48 monthly increase. But they'll be eligible for the utility assistance program. We'll give them a credit beginning January through September. So their increase is zero as well, and so on and so forth. You can see in the 4,000, 3,000, 2,000. So the 2,000 gallon customer, the Richard and his wife, they would see a $5.92 monthly increase, but if they're eligible for the utility assistance program, they would see a zero increase per month. If they're eligible. There's 3 categories: a senior of low income, a disabled person, and a low income individual, regardless of age.
So Richard's a senior?
No.
Not quite. Yeah.
Okay. Councilman Pusley, are you, okay? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you asked already. Go ahead.
Okay, Richard, going back to, let me find the slide number here. Number 46, where you did the example of the 2 houses. So if the property B, which in your example was a 2,000 gallon water user, if they were also a 10,000 gallon water user, they're still going to pay 1071?
That is correct. But they would have been paying more in water today.
So their bill would go from 2850 down to 1071?
That's correct.
Okay.
But I just wanted to show you the difference in both those areas. In a minute, we'll show you a non-residential that's exactly that equal that you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
Councilman Barrera?
Thank you, Mayor. Richard, townhomes. So I remember we discussed this a little bit. I've got a couple in my district. I happen to live in one also. But so, areas of, our water bill is basically tied to, I believe, a couple of different meters for all the different properties that we have. Have we addressed that, or have you had a chance to look at that?
So I'm gonna let Gabe answer that question.
So it'd be similar to the tenants in the commercial property. So if there's a master meter, like most apartment complexes have a master meter, the stormwater bill would be sent to the master meter, and then the apartment complex could split up that bill accordingly to the tenants.
Okay, thank you.
So on the next slide, I want to talk about is impact impervious areas for non-residential. If you look at, so Councilman Pusley, this is where we looked at an identical property size, or just about a property size, and then looked at the gallons utilized. So currently today, one of the water users is a high water user, over 142,000 gallons, and they pay almost $500 a month in stormwater fees because they're a high water user. They both have the same impervious cover. They're at 0.85% intensity of runoff. Because you see there, they're either roof line or just parking lot both of them, so they both have the same square feet. One of them's a 5,000 gallon user. They're at 1069, so they probably have a bathroom and maybe a sink or that type of thing. So they're not a high water user, but they are high water discharge and stormwater. So they pay 1069. The other one pays 500. But if you go back to calculate them to be the same, because they have the same intensity runoff and they're basically the same size property, they'd be $83.35 or $83.41, basically currently about the same amount of runoff. But you see, one of them is significant savings because they're paying based on the usage of water today, not what they're discharging. So again, one is paying more and the other one today is not paying as much. Big disparity in there when you're looking at properties like that. And this is non-commercial here. No, definitely. That's what I was telling you earlier. Property A will not call you. All they think is something went wrong in my bill, and I'm not going to say a word to you. Yes, property B is going to say, why did my bill go up to $70? Well, we want to do that education piece to let everyone know why that is. Again, it's swinging the pendulum and based on what's fair for stormwater usage today. Yes. Oh, so again, as Peter said, this also gives us some time to get out there to the public because we're not saying to implement immediately. We're not proposing for you to approve immediately. What we're saying is after October that it wouldn't go into effect till January. It gives us a few months to get out there, talk to the individuals, let everybody know about it, give them that assistance, be able to put those programs together to be able to say, here we are, this is the reason why we need to do this.
Right, the recommendation is to consider approval as part of the budget, but the effective date won't be till January to
That
give
is
us time
correct.
to educate the community.
That's correct. Yes, sir. And again, this is our proposal. So again, looking at benchmarking cities, we went back through to take a look at and say, okay, are we off base? Are we putting this formulation together totally different than any other cities have done before? Are we basically on line with what other cities have, Texas cities have done? We listed the Texas cities here that are the 7 largest cities above us. And so basis of their fee, if you look in the first column, the basis of their fee is impervious cover for most of them. You go to Houston, it's impervious area and drainage facilities. So they look at what drainage facility is behind a home or behind a business. So if there's a bayou back there, is there a channel, is there not a channel? And they do that calculation that way. In Fort Worth, they do livable space. So still impervious cover, but livable space. In Arlington, it's an equivalent residential unit. They came back and said, this is the unit and this is what you're gonna pay by an equivalent residential unit. And Corpus Christi, we're water consumption. We're on how much potable water we use. As you see, none of the other cities are based that way. So in the residential rates, so what are the rates? So you look at, are they tiered rates or flat rates? The majority of them are tiered rates. If you look at a flat rate, that's going to be Arlington. They set a flat rate for everyone. Corpus Christi, we have a base charge plus tier rates for that. So non-residential, what does everybody do? Well, most of them, again, are impervious cover. So again, this is going back and just double checking, are we along the lines of what industry standard is and moving forward with? But currently today, I just want to leave you with this statement. Currently today, we are not along the lines of industry standards in the way that we fund our stormwater program. We're looking at doing that. And everything I talked to you today is basically so that we stop this process today. We've got to move forward. And for us, that's the proposal that we're giving you, is going along to get to the next level in stormwater and to be able to plan our programs for the future. So what are our next steps? So we're currently in those areas. Currently today, August 9th through 18th, the community input sessions, they're going along. There's another one tonight. There was one last night. Today, we're in our Public Works Budget Workshop. August 31st, it's already been advertised. There's a public hearing. So that public hearing would be the first reading of the ordinance if you choose to continue the process. And that hearing will also create the stormwater utility with its fee increases, with its fee assessments as well. And then September 7th is the second reading of the ordinance, if you choose to move that forward again. And then January 1st would be implementation of the stormwater fee if approved as presented. So that's my presentation. My apologies that it took that long amount of time, but there was a lot of information.
Mr. Hernandez.
You know, in looking at your presentation, it seems like we're just kind of replacing what we've had, and we're not actually adding any revenue. Maybe $2 million, I believe,
Yes,
is
sir.
going to be the difference. But I also want to ask about some other funding that you may have available to you that is kind of sitting in your previous bond packages, like for stormwater. You have, or utility bonds, you have funding from 2020 or 2015. Actually, 2021, they have $33 million from a revenue bond there. What is your plan for this, for those funds?
I believe those are street support, sir. Those are
Those
street
are all
support
street
bonds.
support?
Yes.
So what about the ones from the previous years? Are you going to
Again,
use
those
those
are
for
all
streets?
street supports. So when we talked about debt service, and if we brought over the debt service with us in this process, it would be double the amount of our funding that we would need currently today, because as the way that it's funded, we were utility, and utility has to support the bond programs that get pushed forward. So like street
So
support.
all those are not going to be coming out of your debt service?
At this point, no, but moving forward, they will be. So if it's a 2022 bond, other bonds that move forward like that, we will continue to do that so we can.
So
plan
all those are going to
accordingly.
be paid for through water?
That is correct,
Okay,
sir.
so that $33 million is going to be paid through water.
Yes,
Just
sir.
wanted to verify that. With regards to streets, you still have funding available from streets from 2012. You have $425,000. From 2014, you have $120,000. From you have certificates of obligation from 2012, $5 million. Certificates of obligation from 2016, $252,000. Street obligation from 2016, $455,000. Trying to get an idea, and I can go on. There's several others, but I want to kind of get an idea of what we're planning to do with that funding.
So that's, again, is capital. So all that capital, those projects need to be cleaned up so that we can look at how those move forward.
Right. So looking at the amounts, I mean, can we look at, what we have been using them for is for shortfalls from previous, we'll make an estimation, we'll be over an amount. Specifically, the one that comes to mind was a recent one on Leopard, where we pulled it up from a residential street bond. Instead of using it for residential streets, we just took that money and put it into the shortfall on Leopard. But we have this funding here. I just want to make sure it's not just sitting there, like you have some sitting there from 2012 that, we really should program for improving the streets. I'd like to know what your plan is.
So my plan would be to work with our capital improvements group, our engineering group, to see how we can, again, clean up those projects to be able to see how we can utilize that dollars.
So when can you present that to us at City Council?
Yeah, so you'll see in our engineering presentation, there's several old bond programs, and City Council, as part of your financial policies, included a new section that says annually the city staff will present to council balances and accounts that we can close out, and we'll recommend projects or recommend uses, and council will either accept those recommendations or choose one of your own. That'll be an annual process. We don't do that today, but we will be doing it. Our goal is to begin that work after the budget, so this fall, and then we'll present for the first set of cleanup to the council early 2022, so January, February. Constance will take the lead on that, our chief financial officer, not Richard necessarily. So we have to establish that business process. Many cities do that routinely. It's either annually or biannually, but with all those capital accounts, it's important that they get reviewed, make sure all the bills are paid, closed out, funds that are available, we'll recommend uses for them.
Right, and then some will have some restrictions, some will have to be for
Exactly right,
specific
yeah.
items. So I just
Exactly.
want to kind of get, I don't want this money to just sit there.
We don't either, right,
and,
especially with all the
especially
needs.
when we have all the needs.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, sir. That'll
All
be
right.
coming, so we'll work on it this fall, and we'll get something early 2022.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
With regards to the rates, with anything, it's probably not going to be perfect. We'll have to probably make adjustments. We'd like probably some monitoring once it gets implemented, if it does pass, ordinance-wise. But ultimately for me, I want to make sure it's a fair process. And you may need to monitor it to make sure there's no outliers that, get screwed in the process. So, thank you.
Yes, sir.
No more questions.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're gonna,
Councilman, I'm sorry, Councilman Pusley. Yes.
just a second, Richard.
Yeah, Richard, I guess going back to the street maintenance and reconstruction on slide 7, where I asked the questions before, I'd just like to see if there's some way in the future if we can figure out a method of equating what we're spending on collectors compared to our residential streets. I just have a real concern about the residential component. I think we're making great progress on our collectors, and as you said, those are important, but our residential streets are also important. Those are the streets that our constituents travel the most on any given day. And I just think we've got to come up with a better solution than 18 miles a year. And if we can figure out how we come up with a proportional division of how we spend this money, all this what'd you say?
$121 million.
$121 million, and how that proportionally gets divided up so that we're, comparing apples to apples with how we're doing this. So.
Yes, sir. I'll just tell you that the pavement management system we're putting in place will tell us exactly that, tell you what our need is per year, and it'll tell you the amount of years you need to have that. We're doing it, calculating it manually today, but I could run it in 30 seconds to be able to tell you what it is based on the need. And you're correct, it's our biggest need we have here, but it's the most expensive portion of our program. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
So we're going to transition to our water and wastewater utilities, and Mike Murphy is going to make our presentation.
Good morning. Still good. It's still morning time. So, all right. Well, we'll get started. We'll try to go through this pretty quick. First of all, thank you, Peter, and Mayor and Council. Mike Murphy, Chief Operations Officer. Let me introduce my staff. Got Kevin Norton, the Water Utilities Director. We've got Amber Auding, the Strategic Communications Manager. Everybody knows Amber. And then Reba and I are going to be tag teaming a little bit as we get into the rates. But Reba George is the Assistant Director over Business and Customer Support. And then in the background, we've got our Assistant Directors. We've got Daniel Dang, who is the Assistant Director over Water Treatment. Daniel. I got Wes Nebgen, who is the Assistant Director over Utilities Infrastructure, Wes. And then Gabe Ramirez, who is our Assistant Director over Water Quality and Water Treatment, Gabe. And so we're all here as a team to, as we get into the presentation, answer any questions that may come up as part of our presentation. So we'll get started. Wardrobe malfunction going on here. Second. Okay. We'll go to the next slide after introductions. Mission statement for the Water Utilities Department is to provide clean and quality water and wastewater services that respect our environment and our customers, something our customers can depend on. So it's basically, we're a 24-hour day, 7-day per week, 365-day per year operation. Doesn't matter if we're in COVID, doesn't matter if it's snowing, doesn't matter if it's flooding. We're going to be there every day of the week throughout the year. And I think we've proven that. We've got a great group of men and women that are dedicated to supporting this mission statement. So about water utilities. We've got 4 sources of water that we get, that we rely on. We've got one massive water treatment plant, 1,800 miles of water line, 97,000 connections. We manage our water supply, we treat it, and then we deliver water. And we try to do that in a very efficient manner. The sources we get our water from, everybody knows, we have Lake Corpus Christi, the Choke Canyon Reservoir, Lake Texana, Colorado River, and we have hundreds of miles of piping and pumping stations that support those facilities. We have 6 wastewater treatment plants, 1,400 miles of wastewater line, 103 lift stations, and then 92,000 connections there. We are managed, next slide please. We're managed by a dedicated group of leaders, and the org chart you see before you today is our leadership organization chart that covers all areas of water utilities. Our achievements for the past year included our efforts towards getting the city closer to a desalination decision. We've had several town hall meetings. We were approved with the SWIFT loan in completion of our environmental discharge study. Those are all major accomplishments, which took a lot of work to get us there. During February of 2021, everyone remembers the extreme weather event, and Corpus was one of the first major cities metro-sized cities to lift the boil water notice, which was a huge accomplishment. $48 million in the American Rescue Plan Act will be allocated citywide for water line replacements and wastewater lift stations. We've got plans to do all of that. We've already started that process on our lift stations. We've already started that process this year of ordering several thousand feet of pipe and adding new equipment to that process. We are in the process of expediting the elevated lift stations that are standing empty, and we've got a plan in place to move that project forward. These are all big projects that, and I think the achievement is that we're getting those elevated storage tanks online during the 22 fiscal year. Performance measures, water production at the water treatment plant. In 21, we averaged about 66 million gallons per day. 22, it's going to be closer to 76 million gallons a day. This past year, our biggest day was 88.4 million. The plant is currently rated at 161 million gallons per day, and so we're working on maintaining that level of service. We do have room to grow. Water quality, 100% across the board as far as meeting our, did that go out? Okay. Meeting our requirements with TCEQ. Service response time. The percentage of water main breaks repaired within the first 24 hours, which is a critical piece of what we do. We addressed it 90%. This year we're going to do it 95%, and we're going to continue to improve upon that. Capital investment dollars in our wastewater treatment plants, gone from $15 million this year, and we're proposing almost $35 million for the upcoming year. So the groups that provide our water services, we have water supply and treatment, wastewater and reuse, maintenance and infrastructure, and then customer service and engagement. It all totals up to about, in our proposed budget, 541 employees for the upcoming year. Now, like I said earlier, this is a 24-hour per day, 365-day per year operation. So our wastewater proposed operating budget this year is $217 million. That will increase our number of employees from 513 to 541, and it breaks out $144 million for water and $70.3 million for wastewater. The proposed operating budget for this year is $142 million. This is water. $142.9 million is our proposed operating budget for this coming year. We've got it broken out into 25% on raw water, 37% on water treatment, 31% on distribution, 4% on quality, and 3% for transfer into the stormwater fund. The revenue anticipated to be $138 million this year, and expenditures anticipated at $142. Difference is 4.3. We have a fund balance currently of, or going into 2022, of $38.4 million. 20 of that will go towards our 3-month contingency, and the remainder will go for emergency type projects as they come up. Our enhancements for 2022, the addition of 2 positions to take over backflow prevention program from development services. We are adding 4 positions to our customer service and strategic planning. Our effort there is to provide quick response, customer service training, safety training, online call, social media, addressing that. And Amber, if you want to talk about what you're planning on doing with the 2 people you're going to add to your staff on customer service.
Happy to. As you're aware, communications and public relations is new for water utilities. So this will be the first time we've actually had our own code and the ability to have public relations and communications. So we're adding 2 additional staff. This will give us the ability to have project management and product coordination, which we don't have currently. We really don't have a segregation of duties at this time. Everybody does a little bit of everything, myself included. So we'll have project management. That'll give us leverage for our project software system, Monday.com, to give us tracking capability. We'll also identify where we're spending the most time on our projects and have better deadline management as well. We're also going to add a content design specialist. Right now, that turns into my duties. A lot of the presentations that you see and social media design work, that's what I do. I'd ideally like to lift that onto a person that oversees that so I can do more of the strategy work, meaning we can set our goals, accomplishments, and do most of our forecasting from a communication and marketing standpoint from beginning to end.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And now we're going to go to Reba. She's adding 2 people to the utility business office. We've got 2 temporary employees that these positions are going to replace. And you want to quickly talk about that?
Well, one of these positions that is a temp deals with our construction meters. And this is, believe it or not, a very full-time job. It takes coordination to get the construction meter installed, the backflow device, and also the monitoring of that usage for accurate billing. So this temp position is going to be made into a full-time position. And we've also taken on some payment processes from our finance department, and we will also be enhancing some of our other customer online services. So that's for the other position.
Thank you. The reason I've asked these two ladies to describe the 4 positions is because we're going to put an enhanced interest on customer service this year. I think it's critically important that we elevate our delivery of customer service and the way that we do customer service in water utilities. I think it's extremely important to do that. So I wanted to highlight those 4 positions. I think they're very critical to what we're going to try to accomplish in our business model for this upcoming year. So we have an additional 2 positions for the Mary Roads pipeline. As we all know, let's see, Gabe, you want to talk about these 2 positions right quick? You can kind of come up here. But the Mary Road pipelines is one of our critical water arterials that provides service to the city. And right now, I think we'll go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Gabriel Almeida's Assistant Director, Water Quality and Treatment. So yeah, the Mary Roads pipeline, 101-mile pipeline. Currently, we have 2 maintenance technicians that manage that pipeline as far as all the maintenance and preventative maintenance that goes on there. And so this is going to get us 2 more positions to assist with that. The pipeline's 23 years old. There's more maintenance that's needing to be done with it. And so they're going to be able to assist us with that along the 101 miles of the pipeline, which also includes 2 pump stations as well, and maintaining those facilities.
Thank you, Gabe. And in the capital budget, you'll see where we're over the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to be adding substantial investment into the Mary Road pipeline. And so it's critical that we maintain and manage that, one of our most valuable utilities for water service. And
Yes, go
Michael, here a few weeks ago, we discussed the Mary Roads pipeline and the issues with not being able to run at full capacity. And
Correct.
y'all brought back a number of $9.6 million to,
That's correct.
adjust that. Are we including any of that 9.6 in this 2022 budget to start that process?
Yep. So that's over this year, next year, and then also the next 3 years that we're going to be investing in that. And it's in your capital budget. And Gabe, you want to come and just describe that briefly on the capital budget, and then if you want to turn to those pages, you can turn to them.
Okay. I'm sorry if I'm skipping ahead here. Since you were talking about the Mary Roads,
Yes, sir. So we do have that in the plans here in our 5-year capital improvement plan. This next year is going to focus on the design work that's needing to be done to upgrade the pipeline to get it to where we can go full capacity if the demand called for that.
okay. Has that pipeline, since its construction, ever been able to run at full capacity? Or has this problem we're having now existed since it was installed?
So the demands have never called for it to run to full capacity, so it hasn't been run to full capacity yet.
But no,
And it could have run in the beginning, but at this point, there's some
that's my
upgrades that are
question.
needed.
Could it have run at full capacity when it was implemented?
In the beginning, yes, sir. 1998,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Thank you.
So in addition to that answer, Councilman, I did talk with engineer with HDR. I think they were one of the main designers of the Mary Road pipeline. Did say that when they initially tried to run that, when they were testing it, when it was installed, they did have several problems with the pipe not holding that pressure. So amendments and changes had to be made to that pipeline to address those issues initially.
Which may or may never have been done.
No, according to the engineer, they were done, but it was a challenge. And his recommendation, and I think our recommendation to council, is because it could run at 100% capacity doesn't mean that we would ever recommend that because of the age of the system.
Okay.
Yeah, so there, we'll talk about that more as we get into this next 5-year plan, but that's one of the reasons that we want to add these additional staff, because we are putting in cathodic protection, and we are doing some additional repair to the pipeline, and then to the pumping stations, and to the ground storage tanks. There's several things that are going to go into these next 5 years.
Okay. So within the next 5 years, we should be able to run it at a higher capacity
Yes,
if we
yeah.
needed to.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, next slide. So water CIP for the upcoming year, we are proposing $111 million for water projects for the upcoming year. We've got improvements at Choke Canyon Dam, Wesley Sill Dam, and Mary Rose Pipeline, like we just described. Owen Stevens Water Treatment Plant and the raw water chemical feed, there's going to be substantial improvements there. Flower Buff water line extension, and then $13 million is going to go towards line replacements through our first round of funding for the American Recovery Act. We are spreading those funds over the next 2 years. And like I said earlier, we are already purchasing equipment and materials with that American Relief Fund. Now, our CIP, our revenue sources right now, 71% come from revenue bonds, 12% from the American Rescue and Recovery Plan, 15% from SWIFT loans, and then 2% from Port of Corpus Christi. That is for the to replace the lines going under the channel as the deepening and widening of that channel. That's a matching fund from the port. And then one of our favorite topics is the water towers. So capital improvement investment of $5.6 million, and that's going to be for the construction of a new Flower Buff water tower and modifications to the Holly and the Rand Morgan water towers to include the pressure relief regulating valves to get those back online. And like I said earlier, we're working very hard with our engineering department right now. The city manager and I just signed the emergency declaration so we can order the equipment and material to get those towers back online. They do have a long lead delivery time. And so what we're trying to do is, while we're procuring a contractor, we go ahead, the city goes ahead, and we order that equipment through our emergency declaration. And hopefully we'll cut out several months of delivery schedule on that. Next slide. So other funds in the water department, the Texas Water Development Board has approved $11.4 million towards environmental surveys, permitting, conceptual design, power transmission, and contingency. Our 2022 plan is using the drought surcharge, or continuing to acquire funds through the drought surcharge through the Port of Corpus Christi. The drought surcharge is an exemption fee, a non-mandatory, non-refundable fee of 25 cents per 1,000 gallons of water per month, paid by large volume industrial customers, to be exempt from the applicable allocation of surcharge for wastewater shortage conditions.
Mr. Murphy, we have a question. Councilman Smith?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. So we've got a couple of different numbers. I know this is a source of fund, but we've got in our CIP in the budget $15.8 million.
Yes, sir.
On desal and 6.8. A couple of issues. I'm a little bit concerned about. We originally, I know you're new, but we did $2.75 million to get our permits. And the question was asked at the time that we did that, does that get us our permits? And the answer was yes, if it doesn't go to contested case on there. So that's money, I think, that has been spent. We got another $3.4 million in permitting on there. And again, I'm looking $15.8 million on desal. And it looks like another $6.8 million unspent. So is that $21 million that we're
I don't think. Amber's got her numbers over there, but we anticipated this question might come up, so she's just going to let her walk you through that right quick.
Okay. Councilmember Smith, what I can't answer for you is the 2.7. That was previous to me, but what I can answer for you is what I show now for fiscal years and how that allocation works. And let me make sure I get it right for you. So the 15+ million that you see allocated in the budget includes that 11.4 million that we had allocated from this fiscal year because it hasn't been invested. So that rolls over for the next fiscal year because we're in the in-depth analysis and evaluation to understand how we're going to go forth with seawater desalination. There is permitting included in that, and the permitting that is outstanding is what we still have to do for the intake. We still have one more intake and discharge with the TCEQ because we haven't completed that since we turned in the recent modeling study. We also need to complete our permitting with the Army Corps of Engineer, which is a very tedious process, and that includes legal, engineering, biologists. So that has been included in the sum that you see, as well as legal contingencies, land acquisition, the power study with AEP. So those sums are broken down and included. What we believe has changed from the figure of the 11.4 plus the additional amount, that sum that you see, is additional contingencies for land acquisition. And why is because we haven't determined where the site will be, and we know that there are market variances right now in how real estate is working. So there are so many unknowns that we know there's a difference in contingency to plan for. Our land acquisition was once 1.1 million that we planned for. We don't know where we're going to put the plant. We don't know where we're going to buy the plant. We're in negotiation and nothing has been determined. So nothing is final.
I guess my concern, though, is we talked extensively about the $12 million, and now we're at a $15 million figure. And we did do the $2.75 million, I think, in 2017. That was some SWIFT funding on there. And just, you know, we're looking at $20 million in here, and we're not even close to doing anything with it. And the council policy is drought-resistant water and affordable water. And if spending this kind of money on there, we're not going to hit that affordable water bar. And I think some of us that have been on council, we've had a lot of discussions, you all that are more recent on there, but you know, we were told $2.75 million, we've got a permit. And you know, I'm looking at another additional $3.4 million. It's a concern with it on there, and we know the affordable portion of that with it. $20 million before we get anywhere, any place, any time on there, we're not going to bring in affordable water with it on it. And I've always been a supporter of desal on there, but I've also been a supporter of affordable water with it. And I think we need to be very cautious and very careful as a group. Just because we were able to get $222 million allocation doesn't mean we have to spend it. Doesn't mean, okay, well, you know, let's open the floodgates and again, you know, $20 million and we're still just in the talking phase. And we need to work on it. So thank you.
Councilman Smith, I will get with you personally, and we'll walk through that. I think it's more of a, let's sit down and let us understand exactly what it is that you're wanting us to look at and define, and we'll definitely do that. Okay. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Where are all those numbers he's quoting? I don't see the.
Page 65.
We can provide you that list.
498 of the budget.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay, so wastewater. Proposed operating budget for this year's wastewater budget. I'm sorry. There we go. The proposed operating budget for 22 is $74.2 million, and anticipated revenue is $83.1 million. Percentages go to the collection system, lift stations, and then wastewater treatment, obviously. Our goal is to build up our surplus fund in wastewater. Right now, once you take out our 11% or our three-month contingency, this year we're just going to barely break even. Hopefully next year, with the fee increase for wastewater of $1.97 for an average homeowner, we're going to be able to meet our 3% contingency plus establish a 6.7 surplus. 3 months. Thank you. Wastewater Enhancement 2022, addition of 8 positions for wastewater treatment plant preventive maintenance activities. This is a critical piece of our wastewater business model. Right now, we've got a pool of employees that basically cover the entire city, which is 6 wastewater treatment plants and 103 lift stations. So my goal in the new business model that we're creating right now is to create 6 what I'm calling pods that surround each one of our wastewater treatment facilities, and we're going to dedicate a group of 5 individuals to each one of these pods around the wastewater treatment facility, which includes all of the surrounding lift stations in that area. And we're going to go from a reactive program to a preventative maintenance program, which is what we're trying to do. So with these 8 positions, each one of these facilities or each one of these pods is going to have 3 mechanics and 2 electricians. And what this is going to help us do is we're going to become more proactive. We're going in our asset lifecycle maintenance program. It's going to help us reduce the amount of time we spend on emergency, on-call, after-hour overtime work that sort of plagues our operations right now. So this is what we're going to put in place with the additional employees. And the second piece of that, obviously, is the vehicles to support these additional staff. Okay.
Mayor, if I could ask a question here. I appreciate adding the individuals, but I want to know exactly how you're programming this. I know we're looking at asset lifecycle management. I appreciate the use of the term, but are you doing this preventive maintenance programming manually, or are these work orders being generated automatically through the Maximo system?
They're going to be generated through the Maximo program.
Well, I mean, you can generate them manually through the Maximo program, but they should be to where they populate automatically.
Okay.
So I wanted to kind of understand, have you populated the Maximo system to where it can be done automatically?
Yeah. And so anticipating that question, Daniel, you want to come up? So this is Daniel Dang. Everybody knows Daniel. He is our Assistant Director over wastewater treatment. And just describe what our plan is, Daniel.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Daniel Dang, Assistant Director of Wastewater Treatment. So just Michael, as Michael mentioned, so actually the wastewater side, it's not only wastewater side, all the utility side, we have been using Maximo to automatically create the work order for PM, for preventative maintenance. So to do actually, PM is part of the asset management. Asset management for utilities is to use it's a proactive process to evaluate the current asset based on the inventory, based on the existing conditions, based on the life cycle cost analysis.
Right. I understand.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to find out is, where are we in terms of entering everything into Maximo that requires the preventive maintenance?
So we have been created the inventory by using Maximo. We have several experts focused on the Maximo to to do the.
So give me a percentage. How much of it is in maximum?
For example, for the lift stations, we have 103 lift stations. Right now, we have finished 66 lift stations.
66. So
Yes.
you're roughly about 66%, maybe 65% done.
Yeah, more than that, but we are continuing working on that. Actually,
Okay.
that is also a requirement of consent decree.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm not just concerned about the consent decree, but also going forward in the future.
Yeah.
You know, me and Michael Murphy did a tour of the lift stations in District 5, and they were far from adequate. So, we visited the one on Woodridge by airline.
Yeah.
And out of the 4 pumps there, 2 were down. The electrical panels were from 1980.
Yeah, that is the, I think that is that 2 lift station is the Williams lift station and Woodridge lift station. That is on our CIP. Right now we are finalize the design. So I think like probably November or December, we will present to the council for the construction contract to do the upgrade and the rehabilitation of this actually 3 major lift stations. That will, if these 3 lift stations were repaired, I mean, for District 5 will be much better. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sir, Councilman Hernandez. Kevin Norton, Director of Water Utilities. I just wanted to add on, so with the lift stations, because I mean, you're aware of our citywide lift rehabilitation program. So this coming fiscal year, the Woolridge and the Williams, and those are 2 of the biggest ones. Those are going to be going to construction. Morgan and McBride Lift Station are also going to be in construction, or they are in construction now. So
okay, now they're not specifically called out in the CIP,
right?
You have some that are specifically
they're still in
called
design.
out.
So the design's wrapping up, and we're going to be going to a construction contract in '22.
Okay, but do you understand what I mean, right? You have one that's kind of like a catch-all for lift stations, and it's not just water or wastewater. I've had discussions about Parks and Recreation, other ones that are kind of doing these catch-alls, but they're not specifically within the CIP to say what's going to be done with this particular lift station. And the ones that you were mentioning are not in there, but you do have a couple that are. A couple of lift stations that are, and excuse me, I'm looking at the water. But like, for example, you do have Williams Lift Station, Park Road 22 Lift Station, McBride Lift Station, and then there's one at the Allison Basin Lift Station. But all the other ones that you're mentioning, like for example, the Woolridge one isn't on here. Mm-hmm. Is it in the catch-all of the 19029 where it says citywide lift station repair?
Right, yes, sir. The idea is to, go to a construction contract using that as the overarching project.
Okay, so, I mean, if you're going to be doing a massive amount of work on a single lift station, it probably should be called out separately.
Okay.
I don't think you're going to be doing them on, there's several lift stations throughout the city that you're not going to be doing that kind of work on, which.
Okay. There's been a number of lift stations that have been completed over the past 5 years or so under that project.
Okay.
But I hear what you're saying.
Right. We're not necessarily privy to it because it's not called out.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes, sir.
So
and
I'd
the
like you to get
description-
credit for what you're doing. Right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, I understand. I appreciate that. And what the city manager had done with us, because we had a very generic description 2 years ago, and so last year he had us list out specifically in the description which lift stations we're going to be looking at. And it was a funding piece, with it, but that's to provide more visibility, like what you're talking about.
And Mr. Dang, at some point, I'd like to see, the how you've put it into Maximo. There are several, if you think about it as like an Excel spreadsheet, there's several things that you have to populate within, including end of life, manufacturer, serial numbers, all that kind of stuff. A number of, what needs to be done for preventive maintenance, anything from clean inspect to pack bearings, whatever it may be, mm-hmm. You've got to have some aspect of that in there. And I just
that was what I wanted to mention to you, just related to those projects, because at that point, Daniel mentioned, 66, 2/3 of the lift stations have been inspected. It's difficult because we've got to keep them operating, to get down, but we're going to be doing it. But like with this opportunity, so it's all brand new equipment, and so that's going to get entered in. All the O&M pieces. Maximo is such a powerful tool, you can actually upload the O&M manuals to it.
And that,
along
I
with
think we
photos.
put that in the contracts going forward, right?
Yes, sir.
So
Yes, sir.
that's.
Yeah, so it's, and we can do it too, because like Daniel said, there's a, real sharp staff that's great with the databases. So we use a number of different programs, with it along SCADA, GIS. They all intertwine together so that we can monitor, collect analytics, and, plan for the future, as he mentioned, like the auto-generated recurring maintenance, you have to manually enter all that, but once it's there, and then it just shows up, and so you don't even need to think too hard about it.
Okay. Well, based on our tour, we've got a long
Yes.
way to go.
No,
so.
exactly. And so, I think what we're saying is, we know we've got a gap that we need to fill. And we're working in the new business model that I'm working on with this team. We're going to be working on those. And we would love to have you come out, and we'll walk through it, not just on wastewater, but also on the water side too, of how we use the tools that are available to us. But the other thing is we got to have the bodies. Right now, I think we're spending way too much time reacting to situations, and the preventive maintenance side, which is what we saw on our tour, is falling behind. And so by adding this additional staff, I think our ability to address these in a preventative way instead of reactive way, that's our goal. And so we're going to be working on that. But love to have you come out and walk through and let you kind of see what we do on a day-to-day basis from the Maximo side.
Thank you.
Great. Very good question. Okay. All right. Moving on. So here's just a breakdown of our wastewater treatment facilities that we've got. We're going to be working on in our capital investment program. We've got Allison, Broadway, Greenwood, Laguna, Madre, Whitecap, Oso. And then we've also got the SCADA system. What we're going to be concentrating a lot on this year is security of our sites, of our facilities. And so we're going to be upgrading our SCADA system. And then also one of the things I want to do is add generators in case we have. Did I skip one? Oh, I'm sorry. The slide hadn't changed yet. Okay, so what I was talking off of with this particular slide was our 6 wastewater treatment plants plus the SCADA program, which will provide us an extra layer of security and also reaction time in case something does go on or go wrong with one of our facilities. And then also backup generators, we're going to put those in. Okay. Obviously, one of the things in wastewater that consumes every day that we show up to work is a consent decree and addressing that and eventually getting out from underneath the consent decree. In just a little brief background on that, in 21, EPA signed a settlement agreement. And then we've also, as part of that agreement, over 90 miles of sewer lines were cleaned, rehabilitated 2 major lift stations, 4 of 6 positions filled for program compliance and monitoring. And the other 2 positions are currently in the queue right now trying to hire those positions. Vector truck delivery, like everything nowadays, is very late. Getting heavy equipment delivered in what I would call a reasonable amount of time is almost impossible nowadays. And then we've also got a 4-person crew that is standing by, waiting for the truck to be to be delivered. So we're holding off on hiring those positions until they actually have a piece of equipment. So we're going to hire the 4 electricians, 2 mechanics, and 2 technicians. Those are the 8 positions that we were talking about. Clean and inspect 90 miles of sewer lines. Again, we're going to do that. And then major rehabilitations of 4 lift stations that Kevin was just talking about at Williams, Woodridge, Morgan, and McBride. Okay. At this point, unless there are any questions, we're going to go into the water rate discussion. And I'm going to turn it over to the Assistant Director over our business office, Reba.
Reba George, Assistant Director, Business and Customer Support. I'd like to highlight the proposed changes to the water and wastewater rates for our inside and outside residential and commercial customers, as well as provide you some sample bills for the water and wastewater charges at various levels of usage in the next few slides. These proposed rates would go into effect January 2022 and be in place for 2 years. This slide provides proposed rates for our inside city limit residential and commercial customers. The raw water rate, which is the same for all of our water customers, will decrease 10 cents per 1,000 gallons. And this decrease is directly related to the increased demand for water by the San Patricio Municipal Water District for GCGV, or Gulf Coast Growth Ventures. The minimum charge will not change. It will remain the same. Volume charges per 1,000 gallons over 2,000 gallons will decrease 21% for residential and 22% for commercial customers, saving these customers anywhere from $1.38 to $1.73 per 1,000 gallons, depending on the volume tier. These decreases are directly related to removing stormwater costs from our water rate. This slide shows our outside city limit residential and commercial minimums and volume rates that are proposed to increase by 25%. This rate adjustment more closely aligns the city's cost of providing water services to these customers. Next slide. This table will provide some actual amounts a customer will be billed for water service at certain levels of water usage. The average monthly water consumption for a residential customer is 6,000 gallons. And by looking at that table, we see that a decrease of $6.12 will be seen on their utility billing at this level of usage. Because of the proposed decrease in the inside city limit water rates, customers at all levels of usage will see a decrease or no change in water charges beginning in 2022,
Mayor?
using less than 6,000 gallons a month.
Excuse me, we have a question.
Help me understand this, because when we had originally have a separate water fee for outside the city limits versus the inside the city limits was mainly because of stormwater. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Right? So we had to reduce their costs to account for that stormwater.
Mm-hmm.
However, if we look at the water rates for inside the city limits, at the proposed rate of 508 for, let's say, less than 6,000 gallons, and then the rate for less than 6,000 gallons, or is that a per thousand? That's per 1,000 gallons, right? At 311, shouldn't that be the same?
Actually, the difference is the amount that the inside city limits customer still pays on some of the debt service for the stormwater. Like Mr. Martinez was talking about, the debt service on stormwater.
So that's at $33 million that we just took out this year for utilities, basically.
I believe the debt service is running about $17 million a year on our stormwater debt service.
So the difference is the stormwater debt service. So when it didn't transfer over, it stayed in water. So we have to still pay for that in the water. For how long?
Until all the debt service goes away.
So
I
we
can't
just
remember how far
borrowed
the
33
schedule
million.
It's
have an
probably
idea.
at least
At what
15
point?
years out that debt
15?
service will go away completely. We have a debt service schedule, I'll be glad to share.
Okay, so it should be reducing on a regular basis because debt service going forward is going to be in stormwater, right? Is that correct? So we should
Well, unless there's
slowly
some
over the next
offsetting increases that we need to cover.
over the next 15 years, this thing should either combine, or if we keep it at the same level, it'll be paid off sooner. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilman Smith.
Thank you. Reba, there's a 10-cent reduction in the raw water fee that everybody sees on there. Now your assumption, so that this is assuming additional demand due to Gulf Coast joint venture. So what assumption did you use on there? Do you know offhand?
I do.
I guess where I'm leading, if it doesn't happen, then so we're setting it for 2 years with it. Do we?
That's based on 17 million gallons per day.
How much?
17 million gallons per
17
day.
MGD.
And that was a conservative estimate, and they've already started taking this water, and they seem to be moving towards that amount.
Now, they're running about 4 MGD right now, so they have a ways to go.
I don't know what this last month's take was. I didn't
Yeah.
look at that before I came in.
Okay, but, so it's based on 17 MGD.
Gabriel has some, yeah, go ahead, Gabriel.
One thing to account for is the take or pay contract.
Yeah.
That's 15 MGD.
It's 15 MGD.
So
So that would
17
probably be the really better number to use.
It could
because
be.
that's what
I
they're
don't know how
locked in.
much 2 MGD would change it, but very little.
12%, so it'd be a penny. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Reba.
Thanks, Gabriel.
Okay.
Next slide. Let's look at our wastewater rates. Both our inside city limit and outside city limit customers, residential and commercial, will see increases in the minimum charge and the volume charge. The minimum or meter charge for both residential and commercial will increase 3%. Volume charges for residential customers will increase 5% and 12% for commercial customers. This slide provides you the proposed minimum and volume rates for our inside and outside city limit customers. Actually, this is just inside. The next one's the outside. The next slide shows us the outside city limits impacts. The percent increases are the same for both inside and outside. And looking at our sample bills, next slide, please. This table provides the actual amounts a wastewater customer would be billed at different levels of usage. Remember that our residential wastewater charges are based on a winter quarter average, which is when we take the average water usage for 3 consecutive billing cycles beginning after December 1st, and that average is used then to bill that customer for wastewater charges for the next 12 months. You'll notice that at 5,000 gallons, there's an increase of $1.97.
We don't need to hand it off.
Okay.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you, Reba. That concludes our presentation. So questions, we're ready to answer. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Well, since Mayor's not here, who's the pro tem?
Who's the pro tem?
Is that Martinez? Who's? I think it's Hunter, but I'll take it. It's Michael? All right, well.
Yes, sir. I think it'll be a little difficult, so I'll hand it to John.
Councilman Pusley?
You know, there was a lot of discussion this morning about the fact that we mix stormwater with water usage and the two don't correlate. Well, I've also, since I can remember, had that same argument about water and you determine what my wastewater bill is going to be based on how much water I use, and that includes my swimming pool and my sprinkler system, which have absolutely nothing to do with water going down the sewer pipe. So my question is, you allowed us at the county to install a separate water meter for irrigation systems in our parks. Can residential customers do that as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. We do that, and then we also do the winter month averaging. If it's something, if you don't have a separate meter, you, like say you bought a house with a sprinkler system that's already there, we also provide winter month averaging, which basically very few people irrigate during the winter, so that's one of the things that we can also do.
Okay. Well, yeah, I know you do the winter averaging, but
yeah, you can do a separate meter if you want.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Hernandez.
Thank you. Going back to the water rates, you have an increase of 25% on the outside the city limits and a decrease of 21%. So if you weren't taking into consideration the stormwater fee that was moving over, what would be the increase on the water rate? Would that be 4% if I'm doing the math? From the 25% to the,
The 25% increase is looking at the cost of service for providing that 1,000 gallons of water.
Right.
We want to make sure that it's aligned with that cost. So that's why the adjustment was 25%.
right. So what I'm asking here is if we did not remove the stormwater fee and moved it over to stormwater as a separate fee, what would the increase be on our water rate?
For outside city limit
No,
customers?
for inside city, because the stormwater coming out affects the inside, not the outside, right? So if we didn't take that out, you're taking into account that, right, that it's coming out, so that's why it's a negative 21% on the water bill. If you didn't take it out, would it be an increase?
Given the same revenue requirements, yes, sir.
What would that increase be?
Between 15 and 17%.
So you're asking for basically a 15% increase in water rates for inside the city limits, or inside the city limits.
Well, that,
With this, I mean,
and including the 4.4 million transfer to stormwater. That, we have to account for that too, because we were asked to pay for that for the first quarter of the fiscal year.
right, because of the charges aren't going to start until,
So part of that increase would be to support that, and as well as some of our enhancements and our increased cost of service.
okay, so take that out. I mean, what is the true increase for water rates if you take out everything to do with stormwater?
Everything in the debt service and everything?
What would the increase
I
be?
don't have that number.
But
with
there
me.
is an increase. Obviously, if you got 25% on the outside the city limits, there's got to be an increase on the inside, right?
Well, the
I
revenue
just-
requirements have definitely gone up from last year to this year. So there would probably be a water increase, there would be an increase in the rate whether stormwater was in it or not.
Okay, so I want to make sure that there's, clarity as to what this is, because it's being kind of masked by the stormwater fee being created. So if we can have that information as to what that exactly would be if stormwater wasn't removed. Okay, thank you.
Councilman Presley.
So I guess kind of what we're hearing here is Richard was telling us this morning, we're going to see a decrease in water rates, but you guys are going to take it away. Is that right? We're going to increase the water rates to offset what they're doing with stormwater? Is that what you're saying?
No, the water rate is going down. 21% inside city limits for our residential customers. And that is directly related to the stormwater operating and maintenance costs that we transfer
But
every
you're-
year. $17 million of it.
Okay,
I think, talk about the raw water volume that, I think maybe that's where we're trying to get to, that results in a decrease in the water rate, water fee.
Well, the raw water charge is on every 1,000 gallons of water, regardless of what customer. So it's consistently going to be a 10-cent reduction per 1,000 gallons, regardless of the type of customer.
Yeah,
But the
that's
volume
going down
coming
also.
from the Exxon plant, I think was where a lot of the, talk about that one, Reba.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike, I
Yeah.
misunderstood your question. Mike's right. The increased volume that we're going to be sending to San Patricio for the GCG fee will also decrease the water rate. So there's a lot of factors at play in the water rate. It's not just going to be stormwater and increased revenue requirements. It's also going to be the demand that's going to be going up. But we can try to have that simplified and put together for you if you'd like. But the demand increase also lowers that volume charge.
Right, but the volume that's that Exxon is pulling was 30 million, it was up to 30 million?
17 million gallons a day. And that'll affect the treated water costs because it's treated water that they're receiving.
Right.
So our treated costs are going down.
Right. So
Because of the larger volume.
So that gave us a reduction in the water rate. That resulted in a reduction in the water rate.
just simply because of the volume they're using?
That's correct. That was the biggest impact.
Okay. Are they going to pay the the fee that all the other industries are paying for the, to help us on
Yes, they
the,
pay into the drought surcharge exemption fee.
the what now?
The drought fee? Is
Yes,
that what
the
you're
drought
talking?
fee, that was, yeah.
Drought surcharge.
The drought, so they're gonna pay that as well. Any of the industries that we're selling through the San Patricio water that's going to industry will participate in that. Okay. And so the current $1.07 per 1,000-gallon raw water charge, is that gonna change for residential customers?
Yes, that'll go down to 97 cents, so it'll
90.
go down 10 cents per 1,000 gallons for residential as well.
Okay. What's the percentage?
About 9% on the raw water.
Decrease, right?
Decrease,
9%
yes, decrease.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have right now, thank you.
Okay.
I think that's all the questions.
All right,
Mr.
thank
Murphy.
you very much.
Okay, Mayor, that concludes the work session for this morning. We're a little past 12. What we're going to do is, we're recommending to do the remaining to the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, and the gas presentation Tuesday at 10 o'clock. And so I'm working with the secretary who's going to poll the council to check availability. If we can get a quorum, we'll resume at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, and we can get through the capital budget and the gas presentation then, and then we'll go into our council meeting at 11:30.
Okay.
Okay, so our last thing for the budget today will be 6 o'clock this evening. We have a work session or community forum on the budget. City Council District 3 is the focus tonight, hosted by Councilman Barrera. Anybody's welcome upstairs to the fifth floor conference room if you'd like to join the councilman and myself. Otherwise, we'll see you Tuesday.
Great, thank you. And with no further business, I adjourn the meeting.